The hive world of Thonia bore witness to the birth of someone who would become the galaxy's greatest traitor. In the sprawling industrial wastelands beneath Terra's pale moon, where massive mining operations had carved the planet hollow and left behind a honeycomb of tunnels and caverns, Ezekiel Abaddon drew his first breath. The world that shaped him was one of perpetual violence, where survival demanded cunning, brutality, and an absolute refusal to show weakness. Thonia's surface was a scarred wasteland of strip mines and industrial complexes, but it was in the depths where true power resided. The planet's interior had been transformed into a vast network of hive cities, each one a vertical maze of hab blocks, manufactorums, and gang territories. Here, in the perpetual twilight of artificial illumination and recycled air, the future Warmaster of Chaos learned the fundamental truths that would guide his existence. That strength was the only currency that mattered, and that loyalty was a commodity to be earned through fear and respect. The gang wars of Thonia were legendary, even among the recruiting worlds of the Great Crusade. These were not mere street conflicts, but organized campaigns of territorial expansion that could span entire hive sections and last for decades. Young Abaddon found himself thrust into this environment from an early age, his natural size and intelligence quickly marking him as a leader among his peers. The gangs of Thonia operated with a sophistication that would have impressed military commanders on civilized worlds, employing tactics that ranged from brutal frontal assaults to intricate political maneuvering. Abaddon's rise through the gang hierarchies was meteoric. Where others relied solely on brute force or cunning manipulation, he demonstrated an intuitive understanding of both warfare and leadership that set him apart from his contemporaries. His ability to inspire fierce loyalty while simultaneously projecting an aura of controlled menace made him a natural commander. The scars he earned in countless tunnel fights and hive wars would remain with him throughout his transformation into an Astartes, physical reminders of the brutal education that forged his character. The recruitment trials that would eventually bring Abaddon to the attention of the 16th Legion were themselves a testament to Thonia's savage culture. The Luna Wolves maintained recruiting stations throughout the hive cities, but their selection process was deliberately designed to identify not just physical specimens, but individuals who possessed the rare combination of tactical acumen and absolute ruthlessness that characterized their legion. Abaddon's performance in these trials was nothing short of exceptional, demonstrating combat skills honed by years of gang warfare and a strategic mind that could adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. When the Luna Wolves finally claimed him, Abaddon was already a seasoned warrior despite his youth. The transition from gang leader to Space Marine aspirant might have broken lesser individuals, but for Abaddon, it represented simply another battlefield to conquer. The hypno-conditioning, surgical modifications, and psychological restructuring that transformed human recruits into Astartes found fertile ground in his already formidable psyche. Where some aspirants struggled with the loss of their former identity, Abaddon embraced his transformation as the logical evolution of what he had always been destined to become. His ascension through the ranks of the Luna Wolves was as rapid as it was inevitable. The Legion's culture, with its emphasis on personal excellence and martial prowess, provided the perfect environment for Abaddon's talents to flourish. His fellow battle brothers quickly recognized his exceptional abilities, not just as a warrior, but as a leader who could inspire others to achieve victories that seemed impossible. The tactical brilliance he had displayed in the gang wars of Thonia translated seamlessly to the grand campaigns of the Great Crusade, where his ability to read battlefield dynamics and exploit enemy weaknesses earned him rapid promotion. It was during the early campaigns of the Great Crusade that Abaddon first came to the personal attention of Horus Lupercal, the Primarch of the 16th Legion. The relationship that developed between them transcended the typical bond between Primarch and Astartes, evolving into something approaching that of father and favored son. Horus recognized in Abaddon not just exceptional martial skill, but the rare combination of tactical genius and absolute loyalty that made him invaluable as both warrior and confidant. Horus's mentorship of Abaddon went far beyond military instruction. The Primarch shared with his protege the deeper mysteries of leadership, the subtle arts of inspiration and manipulation that could turn ordinary soldiers into heroes willing to die for their commander. Under Horus's guidance, Abaddon learned to project an aura of controlled menace that could cow enemies while simultaneously inspiring unwavering devotion from his subordinates. These lessons would prove invaluable in the dark years to come, when Abaddon would need every tool at his disposal to forge the fractious forces of chaos into a unified weapon. The bond between Primarch and favored son deepened with each campaign. Horus came to rely on Abaddon not just as a battlefield commander, but as a trusted advisor whose counsel he valued above that of virtually any other. This relationship was formalized when Horus elevated Abaddon to the position of first captain, making him the de facto second in command of the entire legion. The appointment was met with universal approval from the Luna Wolves, who had witnessed Abaddon's exceptional performance in countless battles and recognized his worthiness for such an honor. As first captain, Abaddon commanded the elite First Company, the Justaran Terminators who served as Horus's personal guard and the Legion's most elite assault force. These warriors, clad in distinctive black tactical dreadnought armor and armed with the finest weapons the Imperium could provide, became extensions of Abaddon's will on the battlefield. Under his leadership, the Justaran earned a reputation for absolute ruthlessness and tactical flexibility that made them feared throughout the galaxy. The transformation of the Luna Wolves into the Sons of Horus, following the triumph at Ulanor, represented more than a simple change of name and heraldry. It marked the beginning of a subtle shift in the Legion's character, one that Abaddon both participated in and helped to shape. The new identity embraced a more aggressive and personal approach to warfare, one that emphasized the individual glory of the Primarch and his chosen sons over the collective achievements of the Legion as a whole. Abaddon's role in this transformation cannot be overstated. As Horus's most trusted lieutenant, he helped to implement the changes that would gradually distance the Sons of Horus from their original identity as the Emperor's most favored legion. The process was gradual and subtle, involving shifts in doctrine, changes in recruitment practices, and the gradual adoption of new traditions that emphasized personal loyalty to Horus over abstract devotion to the imperial ideal. The seeds of what would eventually become the Horus Heresy were planted during this period, though few recognized them at the time. Abaddon's fierce loyalty to his Primarch, combined with his growing skepticism about the imperial bureaucracy and the distant figure of the Emperor, made him receptive to ideas that would have been unthinkable during his early service with the Luna Wolves. The warrior who had once embodied the finest qualities of the Great Crusade began to question the very foundations upon which the Imperium had been built. When the whispers of chaos first began to reach the ears of the Sons of Horus, Abaddon was among the first to hear them. His position as first captain gave him access to information and perspectives that were denied to ordinary battle brothers, and his close relationship with Horus meant that he was privy to his Primarch's growing doubts about the Emperor's ultimate intentions. The corruption that would eventually consume the Legion began as philosophical discussions about the nature of power and loyalty, conversations that seemed innocent but carried within them the seeds of damnation. The gradual embrace of chaos undivided that would define Abaddon's later existence began during these crucial years. Unlike many of his fellow traitor Marines, who would eventually pledge themselves to individual chaos gods, Abaddon recognized the power that came from refusing to limit himself to any single patron. His natural independence and strategic thinking led him to see the dark gods not as masters to be served, but as sources of power to be exploited in service of his own ambitions. This approach to chaos would prove to be one of Abaddon's greatest strengths in the millennia to come. By refusing to become the devoted servant of any single deity, he maintained the flexibility and independence that allowed him to command the respect and fear of warriors who had pledged themselves to different aspects of the warp. The skills he had learned in the gang wars of Thonia, refined through years of service in the Great Crusade, found new application in the complex political landscape of the Traitor Legions. The transformation from loyal Astartes to servant of chaos was neither sudden nor complete. Even as Abaddon embraced the power offered by the dark gods, he retained the tactical brilliance and leadership qualities that had made him invaluable to Horus during the Great Crusade. The corruption that claimed him was subtle and gradual, reshaping his priorities and methods while leaving his fundamental nature largely intact. The ruthless gang leader who had clawed his way to prominence in the depths of Thonia simply found new outlets for his ambitions in the service of powers that promised unlimited potential for those strong enough to seize it. The elevation of Ezekiel Abaddon to first captain of the Luna Wolves marked the beginning of what many Imperial historians would later recognize as one of the most devastating partnerships in galactic history. When Horus Lupercal formally bestowed this honor upon his protege, he was not merely promoting a capable warrior, but establishing a command structure that would reshape the very nature of the 16th Legion. The position of first captain carried with it responsibilities that extended far beyond battlefield command, encompassing strategic planning, diplomatic negotiations, and the delicate task of serving as the Primarch's voice when Horus himself could not be present. Abaddon's assumption of command over the Justaerin Terminators represented more than a simple promotion through the Legion's hierarchy. The first company of the Luna Wolves had always been an elite formation, but under Abaddon's leadership, it evolved into something approaching a personal army within the larger structure of the Legion. These warriors, clad in the distinctive black tactical dreadnought armor that would become synonymous with Abaddon's forces, were handpicked not just for their martial prowess, but for their absolute loyalty to their captain, and by extension to Horus himself. The Justaerin were equipped with the finest weapons and armor that the Imperium could provide, their cataphracti pattern Terminator suits modified with additional protective systems and enhanced targeting arrays. Abaddon insisted on personally overseeing the training regimens of his Terminators, implementing combat doctrines that emphasized aggressive close-quarters engagement and the systematic elimination of enemy command structures. Under his guidance, the First Company developed tactics that would become legendary throughout the Great Crusade, combining the devastating firepower of their combi bolters and power weapons with the psychological impact of their imposing presence. The relationship between Abaddon and his battle brothers was complex, built on a foundation of mutual respect, tempered by an undercurrent of carefully controlled fear. His subordinates recognized his exceptional tactical acumen and unquestioned courage, but they also understood that failure to meet his exacting standards could result in consequences far more severe than simple reprimand. Abaddon had learned during his youth on Thonia that effective leadership required the ability to inspire both devotion and apprehension, and he applied these lessons with surgical precision in his command of the First Company. The Great Crusade provided Abaddon with countless opportunities to demonstrate his tactical brilliance and refine his approach to warfare. His first major independent command came during the compliance action against the Orc Empire of Ulanor, where his strategic insights proved instrumental in breaking the greenskin resistance. The campaign against the Orcs required a fundamentally different approach from the typical Imperial compliance actions, as the enemy possessed neither the technological sophistication of human civilizations nor the predictable behavioral patterns of most Xeno species. Abaddon's analysis of Orc psychology and combat doctrine led him to develop new tactical approaches specifically designed to exploit the greenskins' inherent weaknesses. Rather than engaging in the prolonged attritional warfare that characterized many anti-Orc campaigns, he advocated for rapid, decisive strikes targeting the enemy's command structure. His understanding that Orc society was fundamentally hierarchical, despite its apparent chaos, allowed him to identify key targets whose elimination would cause entire formations to collapse into infighting and confusion. The assault on the primary Orc stronghold demonstrated Abaddon's ability to coordinate complex multi-unit operations while maintaining the flexibility necessary to adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. His Justaerin Terminators spearheaded the initial breach, their tactical dreadnought armor providing the protection necessary to advance through the deadly crossfire of Orc heavy weapons. The systematic elimination of orc knobs and warbosses that followed showcased Abaddon's preference for targeted violence over indiscriminate destruction, a tactical philosophy that would serve him well in the campaigns to come. The success at Ulanor established Abaddon's reputation as one of the Imperium's most capable battlefield commanders, but it was his performance during the subsequent campaigns against various Xenos threats that truly demonstrated the breadth of his tactical abilities. Each enemy species required different approaches, and Abaddon showed remarkable adaptability in developing effective countermeasures to alien technologies and combat doctrines. His encounters with the Megarachnid demonstrated his ability to overcome enemies whose physical capabilities far exceeded those of human opponents, while his campaigns against various human civilizations showcased his understanding of psychological warfare and the importance of breaking enemy morale. The compliance action against the interstellar empire of the Oreshan technocracy provided Abaddon with his first opportunity to command large-scale void operations in conjunction with ground assaults. The technocracy's advanced defensive systems and sophisticated fleet assets required careful coordination between the Luna Wolves' naval elements and their ground forces. Abaddon's solution involved a series of feint attacks designed to draw the enemy fleet away from their primary defensive positions, followed by rapid deployment of Terminator forces directly onto the enemy's orbital platforms. His tactical innovations during this campaign included the development of specialized boarding protocols for Terminator squads, taking advantage of their superior protection and firepower to overcome the close-quarters defensive advantages typically enjoyed by defenders in void combat. The systematic capture of Oreshan command centers and communications hubs demonstrated Abaddon's understanding that victory in modern warfare often depended as much on controlling information flow as on destroying enemy forces. The relationship between Abaddon and Horus deepened considerably during these campaigns, evolving from simple mentor-student dynamics into something approaching true partnership. Horus increasingly relied on his first captain not just for battlefield command, but for strategic counsel and diplomatic representation. Abaddon's natural charisma and imposing physical presence made him an effective negotiator when dealing with planetary governors and imperial officials, while his reputation for ruthless efficiency ensured that potential enemies took his words seriously. This expanded role brought Abaddon into contact with the broader imperial hierarchy, including representatives of the Mechanicum, the Imperial Army, and various civilian administrators. His observations of imperial bureaucracy during this period would later influence his growing skepticism about the Emperor's vision for humanity's future. The inefficiency and corruption he witnessed in many imperial institutions contrasted sharply with the meritocratic culture of the Luna Wolves, where advancement was based on demonstrated ability rather than political connections or administrative competence. Abaddon's leadership style during this period was characterized by a combination of personal example and systematic delegation that maximized the effectiveness of his subordinates while maintaining strict adherence to his strategic vision. He insisted on leading from the front during critical engagements, his distinctive Terminator armor making him instantly recognizable to both allies and enemies. This approach served multiple purposes, providing inspiration to his own forces while simultaneously identifying him as a priority target for enemy commanders who inevitably underestimated the difficulty of bringing down a warrior of his caliber. The training regimens he implemented for the First Company went far beyond simple combat drills, encompassing comprehensive instruction in xenobiology, human psychology, and battlefield engineering. Abaddon understood that the complex nature of Great Crusade operations required warriors who could adapt to unexpected situations and make independent decisions when communications were disrupted or command structures compromised. His Terminators became renowned throughout the Legion not just for their fighting ability, but for their tactical flexibility and problem-solving capabilities. The gradual transformation of the Luna Wolves into the Sons of Horus following the Ulanner triumph provided Abaddon with new opportunities to shape the Legion's identity and operational doctrine. As Horus's most trusted lieutenant, he played a crucial role in implementing the changes that would distinguish the renamed Legion from its previous incarnation. The adoption of new heraldry and ceremonial practices was accompanied by more subtle shifts in recruitment priorities and training methodologies that reflected Abaddon's influence on the Legion's development. His involvement in the selection and training of new recruits ensured that the Sons of Horus would continue to embody the aggressive, results-oriented culture that had made them so effective during the Great Crusade. Abaddon's standards for advancement within the Legion were notoriously demanding, but those who met his expectations found themselves part of an elite brotherhood that valued excellence above all other considerations. The loyalty he inspired among his subordinates was genuine rather than merely ceremonial, built on their recognition of his exceptional abilities and unwavering commitment to their success. The campaigns against non-compliant human worlds provided Abaddon with opportunities to refine his understanding of siege warfare and urban combat, skills that would prove invaluable during the dark years ahead. His approach to these operations emphasized speed and precision over brute force, recognizing that prolonged conflicts against human opponents often resulted in unnecessary casualties and resource expenditure. The systematic reduction of enemy strongholds through targeted strikes against critical infrastructure and command centers became a hallmark of Abaddon's tactical methodology. His reputation for tactical innovation spread throughout the other legions, earning him recognition from his peers as one of the most capable commanders in the Emperor's arsenal. This recognition came with increased responsibilities, as Horus began assigning Abaddon to coordinate joint operations involving multiple Legion elements and Imperial army formations. These assignments provided valuable experience in managing complex command structures and balancing the competing priorities of different military organizations, skills that would later prove essential when Abaddon assumed leadership of the fractious Traitor Legions. The psychological impact of Abaddon's presence on both allies and enemies became increasingly apparent as his reputation grew. Enemy commanders who had initially dismissed the Sons of Horus as simply another Space Marine Legion quickly learned to fear the distinctive black armor of the Drach'nyen and the tactical acumen of their leader. Conversely, Imperial forces fighting alongside Abaddon's warriors found their own performance enhanced by proximity to such an elite formation, the confidence inspired by the first captain's presence translating into improved battlefield effectiveness across entire army groups. The corruption of Horus Lupercal on the moon of Davin marked the beginning of the galaxy's darkest hour, and with it, Ezekiel Abaddon's transformation from loyal son of the Emperor into the architect of humanity's greatest betrayal. The events that unfolded on that accursed world would forever alter the trajectory of the Great Crusade and set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in the siege of Terra itself. For Abaddon, witnessing his beloved Primarch's fall to the machinations of chaos represented both a profound personal tragedy and an opportunity to embrace powers that promised dominion over the very forces that had shaped his destiny. The immediate aftermath of Horus's corruption saw Abaddon struggling to comprehend the fundamental changes in his Gene Father's behavior and priorities. The Primarch who had once embodied the finest ideals of the Great Crusade now spoke in terms that seemed to challenge the very foundations of Imperial doctrine. Yet Abaddon's loyalty to Horus transcended mere ideological alignment. It was rooted in years of shared campaigns, mutual respect, and a bond that approached filial devotion. When faced with the choice between abstract loyalty to a distant emperor and personal devotion to the Primarch who had shaped him into the warrior he had become, Abaddon's decision was inevitable. The gradual revelation of Horus's true intentions required careful management of the Legion's command structure to prevent premature exposure of their treacherous plans. Abaddon found himself serving as both confidant and implementer of his Primarch's increasingly radical agenda, using his position as first captain to identify those battle brothers who could be trusted with knowledge of their new allegiance. The process of corruption within the Sons of Horus was neither uniform nor immediate. It required the systematic identification and conversion of key personnel while maintaining operational security against potential loyalist elements within the Legion. Abaddon's role in this delicate process demonstrated his exceptional understanding of human psychology and organizational dynamics. He recognized that the wholesale conversion of the Legion would require a carefully orchestrated campaign that appealed to different motivations among different groups of battle brothers. Some were swayed by philosophical arguments about the Emperor's abandonment of the Great Crusade, others by promises of power and advancement that chaos offered, and still others by simple loyalty to their Primarch and their immediate commanders. The planning for what would become known as the Istvan System campaign represented Abaddon's first major strategic contribution to the Heresy. His intimate knowledge of Imperial military doctrine and the operational capabilities of the various legions made him invaluable in developing the complex deception that would lure loyalist forces into the trap that awaited them. The scheme required precise coordination between multiple traitor legions and careful manipulation of Imperial command structures to ensure that the right forces would be deployed to the right locations at the crucial moment. Abaddon's analysis of the Loyalist Legion's combat doctrines and command personalities proved instrumental in predicting their likely responses to the false rebellion that would serve as bait for the larger trap. His understanding of Ferrus Manus's aggressive temperament and the Iron Hand's preference for direct assault tactics influenced the tactical planning for the drop site massacre, while his assessment of Korax's strategic thinking helped shape the deployment patterns that would maximize the effectiveness of the ambush. The corruption of the warrior lodges within the Sons of Horus provided Abaddon with an additional tool for managing the Legion's transformation. These informal organizations, originally established to foster brotherhood and mutual support among battle brothers from different companies, became vehicles for spreading chaos influence throughout the Legion's rank and file. Abaddon's participation in these lodges allowed him to monitor the loyalty of individual warriors while simultaneously exposing them to ideas and influences that would gradually erode their commitment to Imperial ideals. The psychological transformation that accompanied Abaddon's embrace of chaos was gradual but profound. The warrior who had once found purpose in serving the Emperor's vision for humanity began to see that same vision as a limitation rather than an inspiration. The powers offered by the dark gods represented not corruption, but liberation from the constraints that had previously defined his existence. This shift in perspective was reflected in subtle changes to his tactical approaches and leadership style, as he began to incorporate elements of psychological warfare and deliberate brutality that had been absent from his previous campaigns. The preparation for the Istvan drop site massacre required Abaddon to coordinate with commanders from the other traitor legions, an experience that provided valuable insights into the challenges that would later face any attempt to unite the forces of chaos under a single banner. Each legion brought its own culture, tactical preferences, and interpretation of their new allegiance to the dark gods. Abaddon's ability to navigate these differences while maintaining focus on the strategic objectives demonstrated the diplomatic and organizational skills that would later make him indispensable to Horus's broader plans. His interactions with commanders like Lucius of the Emperor's Children and Karn of the World Eaters revealed the varying degrees to which different legions had embraced chaos corruption. While some had undergone dramatic transformations that fundamentally altered their nature, others retained much of their original character while simply redirecting their loyalty away from the Emperor. Abaddon's own approach represented a middle path, embracing the power offered by chaos while maintaining the tactical discipline and strategic thinking that had made him effective during the Great Crusade. The logistical challenges of coordinating the Istvan operation provided Abaddon with his first experience in managing the complex supply chains and communication networks that would be essential for any sustained campaign against Imperial forces. Unlike the Great Crusade, where Imperial infrastructure could be relied upon to provide support for military operations. The Heresy would require the Traitor Legions to develop independent capabilities for equipment manufacture, ammunition resupply, and intelligence gathering. Abaddon's background in the gang wars of Thonia proved surprisingly relevant to these challenges, as the resource scarcity and hostile environment of his homeworld had taught him to think creatively about logistics and supply management. The techniques he had learned for maintaining equipment and ammunition in the absence of reliable supply lines translated well to the requirements of a rebel military force operating behind enemy lines. The actual execution of the drop site massacre on Istvan V represented the culmination of months of careful planning and preparation. Abaddon's Justaerin Terminators were positioned to play a crucial role in the initial phases of the battle, their distinctive black armor serving as a rallying point for other Sons of Horus elements, while their firepower helped establish the killing fields that would trap the Loyalist forces. The systematic nature of the slaughter that followed demonstrated how thoroughly the Traitor Legions had abandoned the honorable combat traditions that had previously governed warfare between Space Marine forces. Abaddon's personal participation in the massacre was both tactical necessity and symbolic statement. His presence on the battlefield provided crucial command and control capabilities during the chaotic initial phases of the ambush, while his visible involvement in the systematic elimination of Loyalist forces sent a clear message about his commitment to the traitor cause. The warrior who had once fought alongside the very legions he now helped destroy had undergone a transformation that went beyond mere political allegiance. The aftermath of Istvan V saw Abaddon taking on expanded responsibilities within the Traitor Legion command structure. His successful coordination of the Sons of Horus elements during the massacre, combined with his demonstrated ability to work effectively with commanders from other legions, made him a natural choice for planning subsequent operations in the campaign against the Imperium. The experience gained during the drop site massacre would prove invaluable in the larger conflicts that lay ahead. The pursuit and elimination of surviving Loyalist forces from Istvan V provided Abaddon with opportunities to refine the brutal tactics that would characterize Traitor Legion operations throughout the Heresy. The systematic hunting of scattered Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard elements required different skills from those employed in the initial ambush, emphasizing stealth, coordination with local assets, and the efficient use of limited resources to maximum effect. Abaddon's approach to these operations reflected his growing understanding of the fundamental differences between warfare against external enemies and civil conflict within the Imperium. The Loyalist forces possessed intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics and technology, making them far more dangerous opponents than the Xeno species and non-compliant human civilizations that had been the primary targets during the Great Crusade. Success against such enemies required not just superior firepower, but also superior intelligence, better operational security, and the willingness to employ methods that would have been considered dishonorable in previous conflicts. The corruption that had begun to manifest in Abaddon's physical form during this period was subtle but noticeable to those who knew him well. The chaos energies that flowed through him enhanced his already formidable physical capabilities, while beginning the gradual transformation that would eventually result in his elevation to demon princedom. These changes were accompanied by an expansion of his psychic awareness, allowing him to perceive threats and opportunities that had previously been beyond his detection. The strategic planning for the broader Heresy campaign required Abaddon to think on a scale that dwarfed even the largest Great Crusade operations. The systematic reduction of Imperial strongholds, the coordination of multiple Legion strength forces across vast distances, and the management of supply lines stretching across entire sectors demanded organizational capabilities that few commanders possessed. Abaddon's natural aptitude for such challenges, enhanced by his growing connection to chaos, made him indispensable to Horus's increasingly ambitious plans. His involvement in the recruitment and training of mortal auxiliaries from worlds that had declared for the Warmaster provided additional experience in managing non-Astartes forces under combat conditions. These formations, drawn from Imperial army regiments, planetary defense forces, and various militia organizations, required different leadership approaches from those that worked with Space Marines. Abaddon's ability to adapt his command style to the capabilities and limitations of ordinary humans demonstrated the flexibility that would later serve him well when commanding the diverse forces of the Black Legion. The intelligence networks that Abaddon helped establish during the early phases of the Heresy would prove crucial to Traitor Legion operations throughout the conflict. His understanding of Imperial communication protocols and command structures, gained through years of service during the Great Crusade, allowed him to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited for intelligence gathering and sabotage operations. The systematic infiltration of Imperial facilities and the recruitment of sympathetic personnel within the Loyalist command structure provided the traitor forces with advantages that helped offset their numerical inferiority. The psychological warfare campaigns that Abaddon orchestrated against Loyalist forces represented a significant departure from the honorable combat traditions that had previously characterized Space Marine warfare. The systematic use of terror tactics, deliberate targeting of civilian populations, and employment of chaos-corrupted weapons and ammunition were all innovations that reflected his growing understanding of the power that fear could wield as a weapon. These methods proved particularly effective against Imperial army formations, whose morale was far more fragile than that of Space Marine units. The final approach to Terra marked the culmination of everything Abaddon had fought for since the dark days of Istvan. The vengeful spirit, flagship of the Sons of Horus, and the mobile throne from which Horus had commanded his rebellion, now hung in orbit above humanity's birthworld like a harbinger of apocalypse. Aboard this massive battle barge, Abaddon found himself witness to the gradual transformation of his gene father into something that transcended mortal understanding. The Warmaster's physical form had become a conduit for powers that defied comprehension, his once noble features twisted by the energies of the warp into a visage of terrible majesty. The Siege of Terra had tested the Traitor Legions in ways that even the most pessimistic projections had failed to anticipate. The Loyalist defenses, coordinated by Rogel Dorn's strategic genius and reinforced by the desperate courage of defenders who knew they faced extinction, had proven far more resilient than expected. Each breakthrough came at enormous cost, and Abaddon could see the toll that prolonged siege warfare was taking on the traitor forces. Morale among the mortal auxiliaries was beginning to crack, while even the enhanced physiology of the Space Marines was showing signs of strain after months of continuous combat. Horus's decision to lower the void shields of the vengeful spirit represented a calculated gamble born of strategic desperation rather than tactical confidence. The Warmaster understood that time was working against the traitor forces, with Loyalist reinforcements racing toward Terra from across the galaxy. The Emperor's refusal to engage in personal combat had become a source of increasing frustration for Horus, who recognized that only by defeating his father in single combat could he hope to break the spiritual resistance that sustained the Imperial defenders. Abaddon's position during these crucial hours placed him at the heart of events that would reshape the galaxy's future. As first captain of the Sons of Horus, he maintained command responsibilities that kept him aboard the flagship while simultaneously serving as Horus's most trusted advisor and confidant. The Warmaster's increasingly erratic behavior, influenced by the competing whispers of the four Chaos gods, required careful management to prevent premature collapse of the traitor command structure. The psychic emanations that radiated from Horus during this period were so intense that even non-psychers among the ship's crew could sense the terrible energies coursing through their Primarch. Abaddon, his own connection to the warp enhanced by years of exposure to chaos influence, found himself able to perceive fragments of the cosmic struggle taking place within Horus's transformed consciousness. The competing influences of Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh created a maelstrom of conflicting impulses that threatened to tear the Warmaster's psyche apart even as they granted him unprecedented power. when the Emperor finally teleported aboard the Vengeful Spirit, accompanied by Sanguinius and the Imperial Fist Terminator Squad led by Captain Garville Loken, the ship's atmosphere changed dramatically. The presence of the Master of Mankind created ripples in the warp that every chaos-touched individual aboard could feel, a sensation like ice water flowing through their enhanced nervous systems. Abaddon found himself torn between his duty to coordinate the ship's defenses and his desperate desire to witness the confrontation that would determine the fate of humanity. The Emperor's advance through the ship's corridors was marked by systematic destruction of the chaos-corrupted defenses that Abaddon had helped establish. Demon engines that had taken months to bind and consecrate were banished with casual gestures, while the enhanced Space Marines who had sworn new oaths to dark powers found their augmented abilities useless against the psychic might of humanity's creator. The methodical nature of the Emperor's progress spoke to a strategic mind that had anticipated every possible defense and prepared appropriate countermeasures. Abaddon's attempts to coordinate resistance against the Imperial advance were hampered by the increasing instability of the ship's chaos-corrupted systems. Vox networks that had been enhanced with demonic intelligence began transmitting conflicting orders, while navigation systems twisted by warp influence provided readings that bore no relationship to physical reality. The very modifications that had been intended to grant the Vengeful Spirit superiority over conventional Imperial vessels now worked against the defenders, as the Emperor's presence disrupted the delicate balance between material technology and warp spawned enhancement. The discovery of Sanguinius's broken body in the throne room of the Vengeful Spirit marked a turning point that Abaddon would remember for the rest of his existence. The sight of the angel's corpse, wings spread in a final gesture of defiance, represented both a tactical victory for the traitor cause and a profound spiritual defeat. Sanguinius had been beloved even among the Traitor Legions for his nobility and martial prowess, and his death at Horus's hands demonstrated the complete transformation of the Warmaster into something that had transcended both loyalty and honor. Abaddon's position during the final confrontation between the Emperor and Horus placed him close enough to witness the cosmic forces at play, while remaining far enough removed to avoid direct involvement in the psychic battle. The energies unleashed during their combat defied description, reality itself seeming to bend and warp around the two figures as they struggled for dominion over humanity's future. The Emperor's golden radiance clashed against the swirling darkness that surrounded Horus, creating patterns of light and shadow that burned themselves into the retinas of any who dared to observe directly. The moment when the Emperor struck down Horus represented more than the death of a Primarch. It marked the collapse of everything that had given meaning to Abaddon's existence for the previous 7 years. The psychic scream that accompanied the Warmaster's destruction reverberated through the warp with such intensity that every chaos-touched individual in the Sol system felt it as a physical blow. Abaddon found himself momentarily stunned by the psychic backlash, his enhanced nervous system overwhelmed by the sudden severing of bonds that had connected him to his Gene Father's consciousness. The immediate aftermath of Horus's death saw the command structure of the traitor forces collapse into chaos as news of the Warmaster's defeat spread through the fleet. Without the unifying presence of their leader, the various Legion commanders found themselves facing the prospect of coordinating a fighting retreat against overwhelming odds, while managing the competing priorities and conflicting loyalties that had been held in check by Horus's authority. The systematic withdrawal from Terra required precisely the kind of strategic coordination that was most difficult to achieve in the absence of unified command. Abaddon's response to this crisis demonstrated the leadership qualities that had made him invaluable to Horus during the Great Crusade. Rather than succumbing to despair or attempting to continue a hopeless battle, he immediately began coordinating the evacuation of key personnel and equipment from the Vengeful Spirit. His intimate knowledge of the ship's layout and defensive systems allowed him to identify the most efficient routes for withdrawal, while simultaneously establishing defensive positions that could delay Imperial pursuit. The recovery of Horus's body represented both a practical necessity and a symbolic gesture that would prove crucial for maintaining morale among the retreating traitor forces. Abaddon understood that allowing the Emperor to claim his fallen son's corpse would represent a propaganda victory that could accelerate the collapse of traitor resistance throughout the system. The operation to secure the Warmaster's remains required careful coordination between multiple units while under direct fire from Imperial forces, demonstrating Abaddon's ability to manage complex tactical situations even under extreme stress. The fighting retreat from the Sol system tested every aspect of Abaddon's tactical and organizational abilities. The traitor fleet, already weakened by months of siege warfare, found itself pursued by Imperial Navy elements that had been reinforced by the arriving Loyalist fleets. The systematic harassment of the withdrawing forces required constant adaptation of defensive formations and evacuation priorities, as Imperial commanders sought to prevent the escape of key traitor personnel and equipment. Abaddon's decision to assume de facto command of the Sons of Horus during the retreat was driven by practical necessity rather than personal ambition. The Legion's other senior officers were either dead, wounded, or psychologically devastated by Horus's death to provide effective leadership. His position as first captain gave him the authority necessary to issue orders, while his reputation for tactical competence ensured that those orders would be obeyed even by battle brothers who might otherwise have questioned his right to command. The challenges of maintaining unit cohesion during the retreat were compounded by the varying degrees of chaos corruption among different elements of the traitor forces. Some battle brothers had undergone physical and psychological transformations that made them unsuitable for conventional military operations, while others retained enough of their original nature to function effectively as traditional space marines. Abaddon's management of these diverse elements required careful attention to individual capabilities and limitations while maintaining overall operational effectiveness. The entry into the Eye of Terror marked the beginning of a new phase in Abaddon's existence, one that would test his leadership abilities in ways that conventional warfare never could. The warp storm that had consumed this region of space created an environment where the normal rules of physics and causality held no sway, forcing the traitor forces to adapt to conditions that defied rational comprehension. Navigation through the Eye required not just technical expertise, but also the ability to resist the psychological pressures that emanated from the raw stuff of chaos itself. The establishment of secure bases within the Eye of Terror became Abaddon's first major independent command responsibility. The process required identifying stable regions within the storm where conventional matter could exist without immediate dissolution, while simultaneously establishing defensive positions that could protect the traitor forces from both Imperial pursuit and the various demonic entities that inhabited the warp. The logistical challenges of maintaining military formations in an environment where time and space functioned according to alien principles demanded innovative solutions that drew upon every aspect of Abaddon's tactical experience. The gradual fragmentation of the Traitor Legions during the early years following the Heresy created a power vacuum that numerous ambitious commanders sought to fill. The absence of Horus's unifying authority allowed long-suppressed rivalries and ideological differences to surface, while the corrupting influence of chaos accelerated the development of conflicting loyalties and competing agendas. Abaddon found himself navigating an increasingly complex political landscape where traditional military hierarchies meant less than personal charisma and demonstrated power. The Legion Wars that erupted within the Eye of Terror represented a fundamental challenge to everything that Abaddon had learned about leadership and military organization. The conflicts that raged between former allies required different tactical approaches from those that had proven effective against Imperial forces, as each faction possessed intimate knowledge of space marine capabilities and weaknesses. The systematic elimination of rival commanders became as important as conventional battlefield victories, leading to a style of warfare that emphasized assassination, sabotage, and psychological manipulation alongside traditional combat operations. Abaddon's approach to these internal conflicts demonstrated his growing understanding of chaos politics and the importance of maintaining independence from any single patron deity. While many of his former brothers in arms pledged themselves to individual chaos gods in exchange for enhanced power, Abaddon recognized that such allegiances inevitably led to limitations that could be exploited by more flexible opponents. His refusal to bind himself exclusively to any single aspect of chaos allowed him to draw upon the full spectrum of warp's spawned abilities while maintaining the strategic flexibility necessary for long-term success. The transformation of the Sons of Horus into the Black Legion represented more than a simple change of name and heraldry. It marked Abaddon's complete assumption of authority over the fractured remnants of his former legion. The process required the systematic elimination or conversion of potential rivals within the Legion's command structure, while simultaneously attracting warriors from other traitor legions who recognized the advantages of serving under unified leadership. The adoption of black armor and the abandonment of their previous identity symbolized the rejection of their past failures and the embrace of a new purpose under Abaddon's guidance. The establishment of Abaddon's authority as Warmaster of Chaos required careful negotiation with the various faction leaders who had emerged during the Legion Wars. Each potential ally brought their own agenda and expectations, while potential enemies required either elimination or neutralization to prevent future challenges to his authority. The complex web of alliances and rivalries that characterized chaos politics demanded constant attention and frequent recalibration as circumstances changed and new opportunities emerged. The death of Horus had shattered more than just the Warmaster's physical form. It had destroyed the very identity that had bound the 16th Legion together for over 2 centuries. In the chaotic aftermath of the failed siege, as the remnants of the Sons of Horus fled deeper into the Eye of Terror, Abaddon found himself commanding warriors who no longer knew what they were fighting for. The gene seed that had once connected them to their beloved Primarch now felt like a curse, a constant reminder of their ultimate failure and the death of the one figure who had given meaning to their existence. The fragmentation that followed was both inevitable and catastrophic. Without Horus's unifying presence, the various companies and battalions of the Sons of Horus began to splinter along lines of personal loyalty, ideological differences, and competing interpretations of what their future should hold. Some advocated for a return to the Imperium, believing that the Emperor might show mercy to those who renounced their allegiance to chaos. Others pushed for deeper corruption, seeking to lose themselves entirely in service to the dark gods as a means of escaping the pain of their defeat. Still others simply wanted to disappear into the vast expanses of the Eye of Terror, becoming raiders and pirates with no greater ambition than survival. Abaddon watched this dissolution with growing alarm, recognizing that the scattered remnants of his legion would be easy prey for the various predators that stalked the Eye of Terror. The other traitor legions, already engaged in their own internal struggles, viewed the Sons of Horus as potential recruits for their own forces, or simply as obstacles to be eliminated. The World Eaters had largely abandoned any pretense of organized military structure, devolving into berserker warbands that attacked anything within reach. The Emperor's children had become so consumed with their pursuit of sensation that they posed a threat to anyone unfortunate enough to encounter them. Even the Iron Warriors and Word-Bearers, who maintained more recognizable command structures, saw opportunity in the Sons of Horus's weakness. The breaking point came during what would later be remembered as the War of Broken Chains, when a coalition of rival warbands launched a coordinated assault on the Sons of Horus fleet anchorage in the Maelstrom's Edge. The attackers, led by a former Word-Bearer captain who had declared himself a prophet of chaos undivided, sought to claim the vengeful spirit and the remaining Sons of Horus gene seed for their own purposes. The battle that followed exposed every weakness that had developed within the Legion since Horus's death, as companies that had once fought as unified formations found themselves unable to coordinate their responses effectively. Abaddon's response to this crisis would define everything that followed. Rather than attempting to preserve what remained of the Sons of Horus identity, he made the radical decision to destroy it entirely. The announcement came during a gathering of the surviving company commanders aboard the Vengeful Spirit, where Abaddon declared that the legion that had failed at Terra would cease to exist. In its place would rise something new, something that would not be bound by the limitations and failures of the past. The symbolic destruction of the Sons of Horus heraldry was conducted with ritualistic precision that borrowed elements from both imperial ceremony and chaos corruption. Every banner, every piece of iconography, every reminder of their former identity was gathered in the ship's largest hangar bay and subjected to a cleansing fire that had been blessed by sorcerers from multiple chaos traditions. As the flames consumed the physical remnants of their past, Abaddon spoke of the new brotherhood that would emerge from the ashes, one that would be defined not by loyalty to a dead Primarch, but by shared commitment to the long war against the Imperium. The adoption of black as the primary color for their armor was both practical and symbolic. Black represented the void between stars, the darkness that existed before creation, and the absence of the false light that the Emperor claimed to represent. More practically, black armor would make it easier for warriors from other legions to integrate into their ranks without the constant reminder of their previous allegiances. The process of repainting their war plate became a ritual of transformation, each warrior personally overseeing the application of the new colors while reciting oaths of allegiance to their new brotherhood. The creation of new iconography for the Black Legion drew upon symbols that predated the Great Crusade, reaching back to the ancient traditions of Terra's forgotten empires. The Eye of Horus was abandoned in favor of more universal symbols of conquest and dominion, while new battle honors were established that would reward achievement in the long war rather than past glories that belonged to a dead legion. The process of developing this new identity required careful balance between innovation and tradition, creating something that felt both familiar and revolutionary. Recruitment from the other Traitor Legions began almost immediately, as word spread throughout the Eye of Terror that Abaddon was building something new from the ruins of the Heresy. The first volunteers came from among the most disillusioned veterans of the other legions, warriors who had grown tired of the endless infighting and purposeless violence that characterized much of post-Heresy Chaos Space Marine activity. These early recruits brought with them tactical knowledge and specialized skills that had been lost during the Sons of Horus's fragmentation, helping to rebuild the Legion's combat effectiveness while introducing new approaches to warfare. The integration process was deliberately challenging, designed to weed out those who were not truly committed to the Black Legion's vision, while forging genuine bonds between warriors from different backgrounds. New recruits were required to undergo trials that tested not just their combat abilities, but their capacity for loyalty to their new brotherhood. Those who passed were inducted into mixed squads, where former Sons of Horus veterans served alongside warriors from the Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, Alpha Legion, and even the more stable elements of the World Eaters and Emperor's Children. The establishment of the Vengeful Spirit as Abaddon's primary base of operations required extensive modifications to accommodate the Black Legion's evolving needs. The massive battle barge, already corrupted by decades of exposure to chaos influence, was further modified with facilities for training recruits from diverse backgrounds, manufacturing equipment for the Legion's distinctive black armor, and command centers capable of coordinating the complex operations that Abaddon envisioned for the long war. The ship's weapon systems were upgraded with technologies salvaged from across the Eye of Terror, creating a hybrid arsenal that combined Imperial, Chaos, and even Xenos elements into a devastatingly effective whole. The Vengeful Spirit's flight bays were expanded to accommodate the diverse collection of aircraft and assault craft that the Black Legion acquired through conquest and alliance, while its docking facilities were modified to support the growing fleet of vessels that served under Abaddon's command. The development of the Black Legion's command structure represented a significant departure from traditional Space Marine organization. Rather than the rigid hierarchy that had characterized the legions during the Great Crusade, Abaddon implemented a more flexible system that allowed for rapid adaptation to changing circumstances while maintaining overall strategic coherence. The new structure emphasized merit and proven ability over traditional rank, creating opportunities for advancement that attracted ambitious warriors from across the Traitor Legions. The role of sorcerers within the Black Legion was carefully regulated to prevent the kind of corruption that had destroyed other Chaos Space Marine forces. Rather than allowing unrestricted use of psychic powers, Abaddon established strict protocols for the employment of warp-based abilities, ensuring that they served the Legion's strategic objectives rather than the personal ambitions of individual psychers. This approach required constant vigilance and occasional harsh discipline, but it allowed the Black Legion to harness the power of chaos without being consumed by it. The Legion's recruitment policies extended beyond former Space Marines to include mortal auxiliaries who could provide specialized skills and local knowledge. These human followers, drawn from the various chaos-aligned worlds within the Eye of Terror, served in support roles that freed the Legion's Astartes for combat operations, while providing valuable intelligence and logistical capabilities. The integration of these mortal elements required new training programs and command protocols that could accommodate the limitations and capabilities of unenhanced humans. The establishment of manufacturing capabilities within the Eye of Terror became a crucial priority as the Black Legion grew in size and ambition. The Legion's artificers, working with captured Imperial technology and chaos-corrupted machinery, developed production lines capable of creating the distinctive black armor and weapons that became the Legion's trademark. These facilities, established on demon worlds and space hulks throughout the Eye, provided the industrial base necessary to support extended campaigns against Imperial targets. The development of the Legion's distinctive iconography evolved gradually as different companies and battalions adopted variations on the central themes that Abaddon had established. The 8-pointed Star of Chaos Undivided became a common element, often combined with symbols representing conquest, dominion, and the rejection of imperial authority. Individual warriors were encouraged to personalize their armor with battle honors and personal heraldry, creating a visual diversity that reflected the Legion's origins while maintaining overall unity of purpose. The training regimens implemented for new recruits drew upon the collective experience of veterans from all the Traitor Legions, creating comprehensive programs that emphasized adaptability and tactical flexibility. The harsh environment of the Eye of Terror provided natural challenges that tested every aspect of a warrior's capabilities, from basic survival skills to advanced combat techniques. Those who survived the training process emerged as versatile fighters capable of operating effectively in any environment against any enemy. The Black Legion's approach to chaos worship represented a carefully calculated balance between embracing the power offered by the Dark Gods while maintaining the independence necessary for effective military operations. Rather than pledging exclusive allegiance to any single deity, the Legion honored all 4 major chaos powers while refusing to become dominated by any one of them. This approach attracted warriors who had grown disillusioned with the limitations imposed by exclusive devotion to individual gods, while providing access to the full spectrum of chaos-granted abilities. The development of new tactical doctrines reflected both the diverse backgrounds of the Legion's members and the unique challenges posed by warfare within the Eye of Terror. Traditional Space Marine combat techniques were adapted to account for the unpredictable effects of warp exposure, while new strategies were developed for fighting in environments where conventional physics might not apply. The resulting tactical flexibility became one of the Black Legion's greatest strengths, allowing them to adapt quickly to unexpected situations and exploit opportunities that more rigid forces might miss. The establishment of alliances with other chaos-aligned forces required careful diplomacy and occasional displays of strength to establish the Black Legion's position within the complex hierarchy of the Eye of Terror. Demon princes, renegade Imperial commanders, and various Xenos raiders all represented potential allies or enemies depending on circumstances and mutual benefit. Abaddon's approach to these relationships emphasized pragmatic cooperation, based on shared interests rather than ideological alignment, creating a network of temporary partnerships that could be activated when needed. The Legion's intelligence-gathering capabilities were developed through systematic recruitment of informants and agents throughout the Eye of Terror and beyond. These networks provided crucial information about Imperial military movements, potential targets for raids, and the activities of rival Chaos forces. The establishment of these intelligence assets required significant investment of time and resources, but the strategic advantages they provided more than justified the effort involved. The gradual expansion of the Black Legion's area of operations beyond the immediate vicinity of their primary bases required the development of new logistical systems capable of supporting extended campaigns. Supply depots were established on various demon worlds and asteroid bases, while mobile repair facilities were created to maintain the Legion's equipment during prolonged operations. These systems were designed to operate independently of Imperial infrastructure, ensuring that the Legion could sustain operations even in hostile territory. The transformation of the Broken Sons of Horus into the Black Legion had taken decades to complete, but by the early 31st millennium, Abaddon possessed a military instrument unlike anything that had existed since the height of the Great Crusade. The Legion's diverse composition, drawing from veterans of all 9 Traitor Legions, had created a force that combined tactical flexibility with ruthless efficiency. Yet for all their growing strength, the Black Legion remained confined to the Eye of Terror, their activities limited to raids against isolated Imperial outposts and skirmishes with rival Chaos warbands. Abaddon understood that to truly threaten the Imperium, he would need to launch coordinated campaigns that could strike at the heart of Imperial power, while demonstrating to the galaxy that the forces of Chaos remained a threat that could not be ignored. The First Black Crusade emerged from careful analysis of Imperial defensive positions around the Eye of Terror and the strategic opportunities presented by the Imperium's ongoing struggles with various threats across the galaxy. Abaddon's intelligence networks had identified weaknesses in the fortress worlds that guarded the approaches to the Eye, while his spies within Imperial command structures provided detailed information about garrison strengths and defensive preparations. The timing was carefully chosen to coincide with Imperial commitments elsewhere, ensuring that reinforcements would be slow to arrive and limited in scope. The initial target selection for the First Black Crusade reflected Abaddon's understanding that symbolic victories were as important as tactical ones in establishing his credentials as the new Warmaster of Chaos. The fortress world of Euroland, positioned at a critical junction of warp routes leading from the Eye of Terror into Imperial space, represented both a strategic prize and a statement of intent. The world's massive orbital defense platforms and heavily fortified surface installations had been designed to withstand attacks from conventional Chaos raiding forces, but they had not been prepared for the coordinated assault that Abaddon was capable of mounting. The preliminary phase of the Crusade involved systematic infiltration of Imperial positions by Alpha Legion specialists who had joined the Black Legion, their expertise in covert operations proving invaluable in gathering intelligence and sabotaging key defensive systems. These operations, conducted over several months before the main assault began, succeeded in identifying critical vulnerabilities in Euroland's defenses while establishing hidden supply caches that would support the later ground campaign. The Alpha Legion operatives also succeeded in recruiting several key Imperial officers whose cooperation would prove crucial during the siege. The void battle that preceded the assault on Euroland demonstrated the effectiveness of the diverse fleet assets that Abaddon had assembled under the Black Legion banner. The Vengeful Spirit led a force that included captured Imperial vessels, Chaos-corrupted ships from the other Traitor Legions, and even several Xenos craft that had been acquired through alliance or conquest. This heterogeneous fleet possessed capabilities that Imperial commanders found difficult to predict or counter, as their tactical doctrines had been developed to fight conventional Imperial Navy formations rather than the hybrid force that Abaddon had created. The breakthrough of Euroland's orbital defenses required precise coordination between different elements of the Black Legion fleet, each bringing unique capabilities to bear against specific aspects of the Imperial defensive network. Former Iron Warriors specialists used their expertise in siege warfare to identify and exploit structural weaknesses in the orbital platforms, while Night Lords veterans employed terror tactics to demoralize the Imperial crews and disrupt their command coordination. The systematic reduction of the orbital defenses took 3 days of continuous fighting, but the methodical approach ensured minimal losses among Abaddon's forces while maximizing the psychological impact on Imperial defenders. The ground assault on Euroland showcased the tactical innovations that had emerged from the Black Legion's diverse composition and extensive training within the Eye of Terror. Rather than the straightforward frontal assaults that had characterized many Chaos attacks during the Heresy, Abaddon employed a multi-pronged strategy that combined direct assault with infiltration, psychological warfare, and systematic disruption of Imperial command structures. The varied backgrounds of his warriors allowed for specialized units to be deployed against targets that matched their particular expertise, maximizing effectiveness while minimizing casualties. The siege of Euroland's primary fortress complex required adaptation of traditional Space Marine assault doctrines to account for the enhanced defensive capabilities that Imperial engineers had developed in the millennia since the Heresy. The fortress had been designed with specific countermeasures against Chaos Space Marine tactics, including specialized weapon systems and architectural features intended to channel attackers into predetermined killing zones. Abaddon's response involved the systematic employment of captured Imperial equipment and tactics, using the defenders' own methods against them, while supplementing these approaches with Chaos-enhanced capabilities that the fortress designers had not anticipated. The psychological impact of the First Black Crusade extended far beyond the immediate military objectives that Abaddon had achieved. The systematic conquest of Euroland and several surrounding systems demonstrated that the forces of Chaos retained the capability to launch coordinated campaigns against heavily defended Imperial positions. The news of the Crusade's success spread throughout both Imperial and Chaos-controlled territories, inspiring other Chaos warbands, while simultaneously causing alarm among Imperial military commanders who had believed that the Eye of Terror had been effectively contained. The establishment of Chaos control over the conquered territories required different skills from those needed for their initial capture. Abaddon recognized that permanent conquest would require the creation of administrative structures capable of maintaining order and extracting resources from the occupied worlds, while simultaneously preparing them to serve as bases for future operations. The Black Legion's mortal auxiliaries proved invaluable in this phase, providing the specialized knowledge and manpower necessary to establish functional governance over populations that had spent their entire lives under Imperial rule. The Second Black Crusade built upon the lessons learned during the first campaign while expanding the scope of operations to include multiple simultaneous objectives across a broader front. The intelligence gathered during the previous crusade had revealed additional weaknesses in Imperial defensive positions, while the success of the first campaign had attracted new allies who were eager to share in future victories. The expanded force that Abaddon assembled for the Second Crusade included elements from several other major Chaos warbands, creating a coalition that represented the largest Chaos military effort since the Horus Heresy. The strategic objectives of the Second Black Crusade reflected Abaddon's growing understanding of Imperial weaknesses and the most effective methods for exploiting them. Rather than focusing on a single heavily defended target, the second campaign involved simultaneous attacks against multiple systems designed to stretch Imperial defensive resources while preventing effective coordination of the Loyalist response. The systematic targeting of Imperial Navy bases and supply depots was intended to degrade the Imperium's ability to mount effective counterattacks while simultaneously acquiring resources that could support extended Chaos operations. The void warfare that characterized much of the Second Black Crusade demonstrated significant evolution in Chaos tactical doctrines since the first campaign. The diverse fleet assets that Abaddon commanded had been reorganized into specialized task forces, each optimized for specific types of operations against different classes of Imperial targets. The coordination between these task forces required sophisticated command and control systems that drew upon both Imperial military doctrine and the unique capabilities provided by chaos corruption of communication equipment. The ground campaigns of the Second Black Crusade showcased the effectiveness of the combined arms approach that the Black Legion had developed through extensive training and combat experience. The integration of Chaos Space Marines with mortal auxiliaries, demon engines, and various allied forces created combined formations that possessed capabilities exceeding those of their individual components. The systematic employment of these combined forces against Imperial defensive positions demonstrated tactical sophistication that surprised many Imperial commanders who had expected the crude frontal assaults that characterized many Chaos attacks. The Third Black Crusade represented a significant escalation in both scope and ambition, targeting the heavily fortified Cadian Gate that controlled access between the Eye of Terror and the broader Imperium. The selection of this objective demonstrated Abaddon's growing confidence in his force's capabilities, while simultaneously representing a direct challenge to the Imperium's most critical defensive position in the region. The fortress world of Cadia itself, supported by extensive orbital defenses and multiple supporting systems, represented the strongest Imperial position that any Chaos force had attempted to assault since the Siege of Terra. The preliminary operations for the Third Black Crusade involved the most extensive intelligence gathering and sabotage campaign that Abaddon had yet attempted. The systematic infiltration of Imperial positions throughout the Cadian system required coordination between multiple specialist units over a period of several years, establishing the foundation for the coordinated assault that would follow. The complexity of these preparatory operations demonstrated the organizational capabilities that the Black Legion had developed since its formation, while the success of the infiltration efforts provided crucial intelligence about Imperial defensive preparations. The assault on the Cadian Gate required tactical innovations that drew upon every aspect of the Black Legion's accumulated experience, while adapting to the unique challenges posed by the system's massive defensive installations. The coordinated employment of fleet assets, ground forces, and various specialist units created a multi-dimensional attack that prevented Imperial commanders from concentrating their defensive efforts against any single threat. The systematic reduction of outlying defensive positions created the conditions necessary for the eventual assault on Cadia itself, though the campaign ultimately fell short of its primary objective due to the arrival of Imperial reinforcements and the fierce resistance of the Cadian defenders. The Fourth Black Crusade shifted focus from the heavily defended Cadian Gate to targets that offered better prospects for decisive victory while still advancing Abaddon's strategic objectives. The systematic targeting of Imperial Navy facilities and supply networks was designed to degrade the Imperium's ability to respond effectively to future Chaos offensives, while simultaneously acquiring resources that could support the Black Legion's continued expansion. The campaign's emphasis on mobility and rapid strikes demonstrated tactical evolution that reflected lessons learned from previous crusades. The coordination of multiple simultaneous operations across vast distances required sophisticated command and control capabilities that tested every aspect of the Black Legion's organizational structure. The systematic employment of specialized task forces against carefully selected targets demonstrated strategic thinking that went beyond simple conquest to encompass long-term degradation of Imperial military capabilities. The success of these operations in disrupting Imperial supply lines and communication networks created conditions that would prove advantageous during subsequent campaigns. The Fifth Black Crusade represented the culmination of decades of tactical evolution and strategic planning, combining elements from all previous campaigns while introducing new approaches that reflected the Black Legion's growing sophistication. The systematic targeting of Imperial industrial facilities and recruitment centers was designed to attack the foundation of Imperial military power rather than simply engaging existing defensive forces. The campaign's emphasis on permanent conquest rather than simple raiding demonstrated Abaddon's growing confidence in his ability to hold territory against Imperial counterattacks. The integration of various Chaos allies into the Fifth Black Crusade created coalition forces that possessed capabilities exceeding those of any previous Chaos military effort. The systematic coordination of different warband specialties and capabilities required command structures that could accommodate diverse tactical doctrines while maintaining overall strategic coherence. The success of this integration demonstrated organizational capabilities that would prove crucial for the even more ambitious campaigns that Abaddon was already planning. The Sixth Black Crusade focused on consolidating the gains achieved during previous campaigns while simultaneously expanding Chaos influence into new regions that had been weakened by earlier operations. The systematic establishment of permanent bases and supply networks demonstrated strategic thinking that went beyond simple conquest to encompass the long-term requirements for sustained military operations against Imperial targets. The campaign's success in establishing permanent Chaos presence in previously Imperial-controlled systems represented a significant shift in the balance of power within the region. The evolution of Chaos tactical doctrines through these 6 crusades demonstrated continuous adaptation and improvement that reflected both accumulated experience and the diverse capabilities of the forces under Abaddon's command. The systematic integration of lessons learned from each campaign into the planning for subsequent operations created a cycle of continuous improvement that enhanced the effectiveness of Chaos forces, while simultaneously making them more difficult for Imperial commanders to predict and counter. The strategic lessons absorbed from the first 6 Black Crusades had fundamentally transformed Abaddon's approach to warfare against the Imperium. Where earlier campaigns had relied heavily on brute force and the shock value of massed Chaos Space Marine assaults, the 7th Black Crusade demonstrated a marked shift toward precision strikes and carefully orchestrated multi-phase operations. The Despoiler had learned that the Imperium's vast defensive networks could not be broken through simple application of overwhelming force. Instead, they required systematic dismantling through coordinated attacks against critical infrastructure and command nodes. The 7th Black Crusade targeted the feudal worlds of the Scaris sector, a region that had previously been considered too distant from the Eye of Terror to warrant significant Chaos attention. Abaddon's choice of this seemingly peripheral target reflected his growing understanding that the Imperium's strength lay not just in its fortress worlds and space marine chapters, but in the vast network of agricultural and industrial worlds that supplied the resources necessary for sustained military operations. The Scaris sector's agri-worlds produced foodstuffs that fed dozens of hive worlds, while its forge worlds manufactured ammunition and equipment for Imperial Guard regiments across 3 neighboring sectors. The preliminary intelligence gathering for this crusade involved unprecedented cooperation between the Black Legion and various other Chaos-aligned forces, including renegade Imperial Navy officers who had been recruited during previous campaigns. These assets provided detailed information about Imperial supply routes, defensive positions, and the political relationships between different planetary governors that could be exploited to prevent coordinated resistance. The systematic cultivation of these intelligence networks had taken years to accomplish, but the resulting information advantage proved decisive in the campaign's early phases. The opening moves of the 7th Black Crusade demonstrated the sophisticated coordination capabilities that the Black Legion had developed through decades of experience. Rather than announcing their presence with dramatic void battles, Abaddon's forces infiltrated the sector through carefully planned insertion operations that avoided Imperial detection networks. Small task forces, often disguised as merchant vessels or Imperial Navy patrols, established hidden bases on asteroid mining stations and uninhabited worlds throughout the sector before revealing their true nature through simultaneous strikes against key targets. The The systematic targeting of astropathic relay stations during the initial phase effectively blinded Imperial commanders to the scope and nature of the Chaos assault. Without reliable communication between worlds, planetary governors found themselves unable to coordinate defensive efforts or request reinforcements from neighboring systems. This communication blackout created conditions of uncertainty and fear that Abaddon's forces exploited through carefully timed psychological warfare campaigns designed to break civilian morale before major military operations began. The integration of word-bearers specialists into the 7th Black Crusades command structure proved particularly effective in operations against the sector's heavily religious populations. These former members of the 17th Legion brought with them extensive knowledge of Imperial religious practices and the theological arguments that could be used to undermine faith in the Emperor's divinity. The systematic corruption of local clergy and the establishment of chaos cults within major population centers created internal threats that forced Imperial military commanders to divide their attention between external assault and internal security concerns. The employment of Dark Mechanicum forces during the 7th Black Crusade marked a significant evolution in Abaddon's coalition-building efforts. These tech heretics, exiled from the Adeptus Mechanicus for their forbidden research into chaos-corrupted technology, provided capabilities that had been largely absent from previous Black Crusades. Their demon engines and corrupted war machines proved devastatingly effective against Imperial armor formations, while their ability to subvert Imperial technology systems created opportunities for sabotage operations that would have been impossible using conventional assault methods. The Siege of Mordian Prime, the sector's primary hive world, showcased the combined arms approach that had become the hallmark of later Black Crusades. Rather than attempting to reduce the massive urban complex through conventional bombardment, Abaddon's forces employed a multi-layered strategy that combined direct assault with infiltration, sabotage, and systematic disruption of the hive's life support systems. The diverse composition of the attacking forces allowed for specialized units to be deployed against specific targets, with former Iron Warriors handling the reduction of fortified positions, while Night Lord specialists terrorized civilian populations to prevent organized resistance. The 8th Black Crusade represented a dramatic escalation in both scope and sophistication, targeting the heavily industrialized Agrippina sector with the explicit goal of capturing its forge worlds intact rather than simply destroying Imperial assets. This shift toward conquest rather than destruction reflected Abaddon's growing understanding that the Long War required sustainable sources of equipment and ammunition that could only be provided by functional manufacturing facilities. The challenge lay in overcoming the sector's formidable defenses while preventing the Adeptus Mechanicus from implementing scorched earth protocols that would render the Forge worlds useless even if captured. The preliminary operations for the 8th Black Crusade involved the most extensive infiltration campaign that Abaddon had yet attempted, with Alpha Legion specialists spending years establishing deep cover identities within the Adeptus Mechanicus hierarchy. These operatives succeeded in identifying critical vulnerabilities in the Forge world's defensive systems, while simultaneously recruiting sympathizers among tech priests who had grown disillusioned with the Omnissiah's rigid orthodoxy. The information provided by these assets proved crucial in developing assault plans that could neutralize defensive systems without triggering automatic destruction sequences. The void warfare that characterized the 8th Black Crusade demonstrated significant technological advancement in Chaos fleet capabilities, with many vessels now incorporating Dark Mechanicum modifications that enhanced their combat effectiveness beyond standard Imperial specifications. The systematic employment of boarding actions using specialized Terminator squads allowed Chaos forces to capture Imperial vessels largely intact, adding to their fleet strength while simultaneously denying these assets to Imperial defenders. The coordination required for these complex void operations demonstrated command and control capabilities that rivaled those of the Imperial Navy itself. The ground campaigns of the 8th Black Crusade showcased the effectiveness of combined Chaos Space Marine and Demon Engine formations in urban warfare environments. The narrow confines of Forge World manufacturing districts, with their maze-like layouts and heavy industrial equipment, created tactical challenges that required innovative solutions. The systematic employment of possessed vehicles and demon-corrupted machinery allowed Chaos forces to navigate these environments more effectively than conventional Imperial armor formations, while the psychological impact of these supernatural war machines broke the morale of defending Skitarii formations. The 9th Black Crusade marked another significant shift in Abaddon's strategic approach, focusing on the systematic elimination of Space Marine chapter homeworlds and recruitment centers rather than targeting civilian or industrial assets. This campaign reflected his growing understanding that the Imperium's ultimate strength lay in its Adeptus Astartes, and that degrading these forces would have long-term effects that far exceeded the immediate tactical advantages gained from conquering individual worlds. The selection of targets required extensive intelligence gathering to identify chapter homeworlds and recruitment practices, while the assault plans had to account for the enhanced defensive capabilities that Space Marine fortress monasteries typically possessed. The preliminary phase of the 9th Black Crusade involved systematic reconnaissance of multiple Space Marine chapter territories, with particular attention paid to recruitment patterns and defensive preparations. The intelligence gathered during this phase revealed that many chapters had become complacent about their security, relying on reputation and tradition rather than maintaining the vigilant defensive postures that had characterized the Adeptus Astartes during the Great Crusade. This complacency created opportunities that Abaddon's forces were quick to exploit through carefully planned surprise attacks. The assault on the Aurora chapter's homeworld of Solace demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of coordinated Chaos Space Marine operations against their loyalist counterparts. The attacking forces, led by veterans from multiple Traitor Legions, possessed intimate knowledge of Space Marine tactical doctrines and defensive procedures that allowed them to anticipate and counter the Aurora chapter's responses. The systematic elimination of the chapter's command structure through targeted assassinations created confusion and coordination failures that prevented effective resistance to the main assault. The employment of renegade Space Marine chapters during the 9th Black Crusade added another dimension to Abaddon's growing coalition of Chaos-aligned forces. These recently turned chapters, still possessing much of their original equipment and tactical knowledge, proved particularly effective against their former battle brothers. The psychological impact of facing corrupted loyalists was often as devastating as their military capabilities, creating doubt and uncertainty among Imperial defenders who had been trained to view Space Marines as incorruptible champions of humanity. The 10th Black Crusade represented the culmination of decades of strategic planning and coalition building, combining elements from all previous campaigns while introducing new approaches that reflected the Black Legion's continued evolution. The systematic targeting of Imperial astropathic networks across multiple sectors was designed to create communication blackouts that would prevent coordinated Imperial responses to subsequent Chaos operations. The campaign's emphasis on permanent disruption rather than temporary conquest demonstrated strategic thinking that encompassed the long-term requirements of the Long War. The coordination of simultaneous operations across vast distances required command and control capabilities that pushed the Black Legion's organizational structure to its limits. The systematic employment of specialized task forces against carefully selected targets demonstrated tactical sophistication that had evolved considerably since the early Black Crusades. The success of these operations in creating lasting damage to Imperial communication networks established conditions that would prove advantageous for years to come. The integration of various demon princes into the 10th Black Crusade's command structure created new opportunities, while simultaneously introducing challenges that required careful management. These ascended champions brought with them supernatural capabilities and extensive knowledge gained through centuries of existence within the warp, but their divine nature also made them difficult to control and coordinate with conventional military operations. Abaddon's success in managing these powerful but unpredictable allies demonstrated diplomatic skills that complemented his tactical abilities. The 11th Black Crusade focused on the systematic acquisition of ancient artifacts and forbidden technologies that could enhance the Black Legion's capabilities for future operations. The campaign's targets included Space Marine Chapter reliquaries, Adeptus Mechanicus research facilities, and various archaeological sites where pre-imperial technology might be recovered. The emphasis on acquisition rather than destruction required different tactical approaches from previous crusades, with greater emphasis on precision operations and minimal collateral damage to preserve valuable assets. The employment of Thousand Sons sorcerers during the 11th Black Crusade provided capabilities that had been largely absent from previous operations. These psychers, with their extensive knowledge of warp phenomena and ancient technologies, proved invaluable in identifying and securing artifacts that might otherwise have been overlooked or destroyed during conventional assault operations. The systematic cataloging and analysis of recovered technologies created a knowledge base that enhanced the Black Legion's understanding of both imperial and pre-imperial technical capabilities. The 12th Black Crusade represented another evolution in Abaddon's approach to coalition warfare, incorporating elements from various Xeno species that had been encountered during previous campaigns. These alien allies, while unreliable and often treacherous, provided capabilities that human forces could not match, while simultaneously creating additional complications for Imperial defenders who had to adapt their tactics to account for unfamiliar threats. The management of these diverse and often conflicting allies required diplomatic skills that Abaddon had developed through decades of experience with chaos politics. The systematic employment of terror tactics during the 12th Black Crusade reflected the influence of Night Lords veterans who had joined the Black Legion in increasing numbers. These specialists in psychological warfare provided expertise in breaking civilian morale and disrupting Imperial command structures through carefully orchestrated campaigns of fear and intimidation. The coordination of these psychological operations with conventional military assault created synergistic effects that multiplied the impact of both approaches. The technological innovations that emerged from the 12th Black Crusade demonstrated the cumulative effect of decades of dark mechanicum research and development. The systematic integration of chaos corruption with advanced Imperial technology created hybrid systems that possessed capabilities exceeding those of their individual components. The employment of these enhanced technologies in combat operations provided significant advantages over Imperial forces equipped with standard equipment, while their exotic nature made them difficult for Imperial tech priests to understand or counter effectively. The accumulation of 12 previous Black Crusades had provided Abaddon with an unparalleled understanding of Imperial defensive capabilities, tactical doctrines, and the psychological breaking points of humanity's defenders. Each campaign had served as both a strategic objective in its own right and a testing ground for new approaches to warfare against the Imperium. The intelligence gathered, alliances forged, and resources acquired through these centuries of conflict had transformed the Black Legion from a collection of broken remnants into the most formidable chaos force since the Horus Heresy. Yet for all their victories, the Eye of Terror remained contained by the fortress worlds of the Cadian Gate, that ancient barrier which had stood as humanity's bulwark against the forces of the warp for 10 millennia. The strategic planning for the 13th Black Crusade began in earnest following the conclusion of the 12th, as Abaddon recognized that the cumulative damage inflicted upon Imperial defenses had created a window of opportunity that might not present itself again for centuries. The systematic degradation of astropathic communication networks, the elimination of multiple Space Marine chapters, and the disruption of Imperial supply lines had weakened the Imperium's ability to coordinate responses to large-scale threats. More importantly, the intelligence networks that the Black Legion had cultivated over the previous millennium had identified critical vulnerabilities in the Cadian system's defenses that could be exploited by a sufficiently massive and coordinated assault. The scope of preparation required for the 13th Black Crusade dwarfed anything that Abaddon had previously attempted. Where earlier campaigns had involved primarily Black Legion forces supplemented by allied warbands, this new crusade would require the coordination of every major Chaos faction within the Eye of Terror and beyond. The diplomatic effort alone consumed years of careful negotiation, as Abaddon worked to forge temporary alliances between groups that had spent centuries engaged in bitter warfare against each other. The promise of shared victory against the Imperium's most critical stronghold proved sufficient motivation for most factions, though maintaining unity among such diverse and fractious allies would require constant attention throughout the campaign. The involvement of all four major Chaos gods in supporting the 13th Black Crusade represented an unprecedented level of divine intervention in mortal affairs. Khorne's contribution came in the form of massive demon incursions that would overwhelm Imperial defenses through sheer violence and bloodshed. Tzeentch provided complex strategic insights and the manipulation of fate itself to ensure favorable outcomes at critical moments. Nurgle's gifts manifested as plague ships and corrupted biological weapons that could devastate Imperial populations while remaining largely ineffective against Chaos forces. Slaanesh offered enhancements to Chaos warriors that increased their combat effectiveness while simultaneously breaking the morale of Imperial defenders through displays of supernatural prowess. The logistical challenges of coordinating such a massive force required innovations in command and control that pushed the boundaries of what was possible using conventional methods. The Black Legion's sorcerers worked in conjunction with Dark Mechanicum tech, adepts to create communication networks that could function reliably across the vast distances involved while remaining secure from Imperial interception. These hybrid systems, combining warp-based telepathy with corrupted Vox technology, allowed for real-time coordination between widely separated task forces while providing redundancy against Imperial jamming efforts. The preliminary operations for the 13th Black Crusade began years before the main assault, as Abaddon's agents worked to destabilize Imperial positions throughout the region surrounding the Cadian Gate. These efforts included the systematic assassination of key Imperial commanders, the corruption of planetary defense forces through Chaos cult infiltration, and the establishment of hidden supply caches that would support the main offensive. The scale of these preparatory operations required the coordination of thousands of individual agents and operatives, each working toward objectives that would contribute to the overall strategic plan. The naval component of the 13th Black Crusade represented the largest Chaos fleet assembled since the Siege of Terra, combining vessels from every major Traitor Legion, along with ships from renegade Imperial Navy formations and various allied Xenos forces. The Vengeful Spirit served as the flagship for this massive armada, its ancient hull bristling with weapons systems that had been continuously upgraded and enhanced over the millennia. The coordination required to manage such a diverse collection of vessels, each with its own tactical doctrines and command structures, demonstrated the organizational capabilities that Abaddon had developed through centuries of experience in coalition warfare. The opening phase of the assault on the Cadian system involved simultaneous attacks against multiple targets designed to prevent Imperial forces from concentrating their defenses at any single point. The fortress worlds of Belize Corona and Kasser Pardox came under immediate assault from massive Chaos fleets, while smaller task forces struck at supply depots and communication relays throughout the system. The systematic nature of these initial attacks demonstrated the intelligence advantages that Abaddon's forces possessed, as each target had been carefully selected based on detailed knowledge of Imperial defensive preparations and resource allocation. The void battles that raged throughout the Cadian system during the early phases of the Crusade showcased the tactical innovations that Chaos forces had developed through centuries of warfare against Imperial Navy formations. The employment of boarding actions using specialized Terminator squads allowed Chaos forces to capture Imperial vessels while they were still combat effective, adding to their fleet strength while simultaneously denying these assets to Imperial defenders. The psychological impact of watching their own ships turn against them proved as devastating to Imperial morale as the material losses themselves. The assault on Cadia itself required careful coordination between multiple attack vectors, as the fortress world's orbital defenses and surface fortifications had been designed to repel exactly the kind of massive frontal assault that characterized most Chaos offensives. Abaddon's solution involved a complex multi-phase operation that combined direct assault with infiltration, sabotage, and systematic disruption of the planet's command and control networks. The diverse composition of the attacking forces allowed for specialized units to be deployed against specific targets, with former Iron Warriors handling the reduction of fortified positions, while Alpha Legion operatives worked to corrupt Imperial communication systems from within. The ground campaign on Cadia demonstrated the effectiveness of the combined arms approach that had become the hallmark of later Black Crusades. Chaos Space Marine formations advanced under cover provided by demon engines and corrupted Imperial armor, while overhead support came from a mixture of Chaos aircraft and captured Imperial flyers. The systematic employment of these diverse assets created tactical situations that Imperial defenders found difficult to predict or counter, as their defensive plans had been developed to fight conventional Chaos forces rather than the sophisticated combined formations that Abaddon now commanded. The involvement of multiple demon primarchs in the 13th Black Crusade added a supernatural dimension to the conflict that went beyond conventional military operations. Magnus the Red's mastery of sorcery proved crucial in breaching the psychic defenses that protected Cadia's most critical installations, while Mortarian's plague-ridden Death Guard created zones of corruption that Imperial forces could not enter without specialized protective equipment. The coordination required to manage these ascended beings, while maintaining overall strategic coherence, demonstrated diplomatic skills that complemented Abaddon's tactical abilities. The Siege of Kasser-Kraf, one of Cadia's primary fortress cities, showcased the brutal efficiency that Chaos forces had achieved through centuries of experience in urban warfare. The systematic reduction of the city's defensive perimeter involved careful coordination between different specialist units, with each formation contributing specific capabilities to the overall assault. The employment of possessed vehicles and demon-corrupted machinery allowed Chaos forces to navigate the city's defensive maze more effectively than conventional Imperial armor formations, while the psychological impact of these supernatural war machines broke the morale of defending Cadian shock troop formations. The discovery and activation of ancient Blackstone fortresses represented a turning point in the campaign that transformed what had been a conventional military operation into something approaching a cosmic conflict. These massive constructs, relics of a bygone age when the galaxy faced threats that dwarfed even the current Chaos incursion, possessed capabilities that neither side fully understood. The systematic activation of these weapons under Abaddon's control created tactical advantages that proved decisive in overcoming Cadia's most formidable defenses, while simultaneously setting in motion events that would have consequences far beyond the immediate military objectives. The final assault on the Cadian pylons, those ancient structures that had maintained the stability of local space-time for millennia, required precise coordination between multiple specialist teams working under extreme combat conditions. The systematic destruction of these artifacts involved not just conventional explosive charges, but also complex sorcerous rituals that could unravel the technological principles upon which the pylons operated. The success of these operations, despite fierce Imperial resistance and the intervention of multiple loyalist Space Marine chapters, demonstrated both the tactical competence of Chaos forces and their commitment to achieving victory regardless of the consequences. The moment when the last pylon fell marked more than just a tactical victory for the forces of chaos. It represented the culmination of 10,000 years of preparation and the beginning of a new age in galactic history. The immediate effects were felt throughout the Cadian system, as local spacetime began to destabilize, creating warp storms that made conventional navigation impossible while simultaneously opening new pathways for demon incursions. The systematic collapse of Imperial defensive positions that followed demonstrated how thoroughly the pylon's destruction had undermined the strategic foundations upon which Imperial control of the region depended. The creation of the Great Rift, that massive warp storm which would bisect the galaxy and fundamentally alter the strategic balance between the Imperium and Chaos, emerged from the catastrophic interaction between the pylon's destruction and the massive psychic energies that had been focused on Cadia during the Crusade. The scale of this phenomenon exceeded anything that had been witnessed since the birth of Slaanesh, creating a permanent breach in reality that would allow Chaos forces unprecedented access to previously secure Imperial territories. The strategic implications of this development would take years to fully manifest, but the immediate tactical advantages were obvious to any observer. The evacuation of surviving Imperial forces from the Cadian system required heroic efforts by Imperial Navy formations that had managed to survive the initial Chaos assault. The systematic extraction of key personnel and critical equipment took place under constant harassment from Chaos forces, while the collapsing space-time environment made navigation increasingly hazardous for conventional Imperial vessels. The success of these evacuation efforts, despite overwhelming odds, demonstrated the dedication and tactical competence of Imperial forces, while simultaneously highlighting the magnitude of the strategic defeat they had suffered. The establishment of Chaos control over the former Cadian Gate region required immediate adaptation to the altered strategic environment that the Great Rift's creation had produced. The traditional defensive positions that had defined the region for millennia were now largely irrelevant, while new opportunities and challenges emerged from the changed nature of local space-time. The systematic occupation of former Imperial strongholds provided forward bases for future operations, while simultaneously denying these strategic positions to any potential Imperial counteroffensive. The psychological impact of Cadia's fall reverberated throughout both Imperial and Chaos-controlled territories, fundamentally altering the strategic calculations of commanders on both sides. For the Imperium, the loss of their most critical defensive position represented a catastrophic failure that called into question their ability to contain the Chaos threat. For the forces of Chaos, the victory demonstrated that even the Imperium's most formidable defenses could be overcome through sufficient preparation and coordination, inspiring new offensives throughout the galaxy, while simultaneously creating opportunities for expansion into previously secure Imperial territories. The transformation of Abaddon from a mortal space marine into the preeminent Champion of Chaos Undivided was marked not merely by his tactical brilliance or political acumen, but by his systematic acquisition of artifacts that embodied the very essence of dark power. Each relic he claimed served as both weapon and symbol, physical manifestations of his growing authority over the fractured forces of the Traitor Legions. The most significant of these acquisitions would fundamentally alter his capabilities as a warrior, while simultaneously marking his evolution from mere warlord to something approaching divinity. The acquisition of Drach'nyen represented perhaps the most pivotal moment in Abaddon's ascension to his role as Warmaster of Chaos. This was no ordinary demon weapon, but rather the physical manifestation of the first murder ever committed, the very concept of ending made manifest in steel and shadow. The demon bound within the blade had existed since the dawn of consciousness itself, feeding on the death of empires and the collapse of civilizations throughout galactic history. Its very presence warped reality around it, creating an aura of inevitable doom that affected both wielder and enemy in ways that transcended mere physical combat. The demon sword had originally been bound within the Emperor's own palace during the final battle of the Horus Heresy, contained through the master of mankind's supreme will and psychic might. For 10 millennia, it had remained imprisoned, a constant drain on the Emperor's already overtaxed consciousness as he struggled to maintain the Astronomicon while simultaneously keeping this ultimate weapon of destruction from manifesting in the material realm. The systematic weakening of Imperial psychic defenses during the 13th Black Crusade created the opportunity that Abaddon had long sought, allowing his most skilled sorcerers to breach the containment that had held Drach'nyen for so long. The ritual required to claim the demon's sword demanded sacrifices on a scale that would have appalled even the most hardened Chaos Space Marines of earlier eras. Entire companies of captured Imperial Guardsmen were systematically executed in ceremonies that channeled their life force into weakening the bonds that held the demon. The blood of a dozen Space Marine chaplains, tortured to death over the course of months, provided the spiritual corruption necessary to breach the Emperor's psychic barriers. Most significantly, Abaddon offered portions of his own essence to the demon, trading away aspects of his humanity in exchange for the power to wield a weapon that could theoretically slay gods. The moment when Drach'nyen first materialized in Abaddon's grasp marked his final transformation from mortal champion to something that existed beyond the normal constraints of flesh and spirit. The demon's influence flowed through him like liquid fire, enhancing his already formidable combat abilities, while simultaneously altering his perception of reality itself. The sword's hunger for the death of empires resonated perfectly with his own ambitions, creating a symbiotic relationship where wielder and weapon shared the same ultimate goal of bringing down the Imperium that had rejected them both. The physical characteristics of Drach'nyen defied easy description, as the weapon's appearance shifted constantly in response to the wielder's emotional state and the nature of nearby threats. In moments of calm, it appeared as an ornate but conventional power sword, its blade wreathed in shadows that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. During combat, however, the weapon's true nature became apparent as its form expanded and twisted, becoming a massive two-handed blade whose edges crackled with energies that could cut through both matter and spirit with equal ease. The demon's whispers, audible only to Abaddon himself, provided tactical insights and strategic guidance that complemented his own considerable intellect. The Talon of Horus, by contrast, represented a far more personal connection to Abaddon's past and the legacy of his fallen Gene Father. This ornate lightning claw had been crafted specifically for the Warmaster during the height of the Great Crusade, its design incorporating both practical combat considerations and symbolic elements that reflected Horus's status as the Emperor's most favored son. The weapon's power field generators had been tuned to frequencies that could penetrate even Terminator armor, while its articulated fingers allowed for precise manipulation of objects, despite the massive size of the weapon system. The recovery of the Talon from Horus's corpse had required Abaddon to overcome both practical obstacles and profound emotional trauma. The Warmaster's body, transformed by chaos corruption and then purified by the Emperor's final strike, had been left in a state that defied normal understanding of life and death. The lightning claw remained fused to what had once been Horus's right hand, requiring careful surgical extraction that preserved both the weapon's functionality and the symbolic significance of claiming his Gene Father's most personal armament. The process of adapting the Talon to Abaddon's own physiology required extensive modification by the most skilled artificers among the Black Legion's ranks. The weapon's power systems needed recalibration to match Abaddon's enhanced metabolism, while the neural interfaces that controlled the claw's complex articulation required complete redesign to accommodate his different nervous system architecture. The Dark Mechanicum tech adepts who performed this work incorporated subtle chaos corruptions into the weapon's machine spirit, ensuring that it would respond perfectly to its new wielder, while simultaneously enhancing its destructive capabilities beyond their original specifications. The symbolic significance of wielding the Talon of Horus extended far beyond its practical combat applications, serving as a constant reminder of both Abaddon's inheritance and his surpassing of his Gene Father's achievements. The sight of the distinctive lightning claw in battle inspired fierce loyalty among former sons of Horus, while simultaneously striking fear into the hearts of Imperial defenders who recognized the weapon from historical records of the Heresy. The psychological impact proved as valuable as the weapon's physical capabilities, creating a mythology around Abaddon's person that enhanced his authority over the fractious forces of chaos. The relationship between Abaddon and the four major chaos gods represented one of the most complex and dangerous political arrangements in the galaxy, requiring constant negotiation and careful balance to prevent any single deity from gaining dominance over his soul. Unlike the vast majority of Chaos champions, who pledged exclusive allegiance to individual gods in exchange for enhanced power and divine favor, Abaddon had deliberately chosen to remain uncommitted to any single patron. This approach granted him unprecedented flexibility and independence, but it also meant that he could never fully rely on divine protection when facing the most dangerous enemies. Khorne's interest in Abaddon stemmed primarily from his exceptional prowess as a warrior and his role in orchestrating conflicts that generated massive bloodshed across the galaxy. The Blood God's gifts manifested in enhanced physical strength and combat instincts that made Abaddon nearly unstoppable in personal combat, while his weapons received subtle enhancements that increased their lethality against any opponent. The price for these boons came in the form of an almost irresistible urge toward violence and conquest that drove Abaddon to seek ever greater conflicts regardless of strategic considerations. Tzeentch's patronate reflected the changer of Wei's appreciation for Abaddon's strategic brilliance and his role in orchestrating the complex political machinations necessary to unite the fractured Traitor Legions. The gifts granted by the Great Conspirator included enhanced psychic awareness that allowed Abaddon to perceive threats and opportunities that would be invisible to normal perception, along with an intuitive understanding of cause and effect that made him exceptionally skilled at predicting enemy responses to his actions. The accompanying burden involved constant exposure to visions of possible futures that could be overwhelming in their complexity and contradictory nature. Nurgle's interest in Abaddon derived from his role as an agent of decay and corruption, systematically undermining the Imperium's institutions and spreading the influence of chaos throughout human civilization. The Plague Lord's blessings manifested as enhanced resilience to both physical damage and psychic attack, along with an aura of corruption that could turn even the most loyal Imperial servants against their masters given sufficient exposure. The cost of these gifts involved gradual physical deterioration that would eventually consume Abaddon's mortal form, though his enhanced constitution allowed him to resist this process far longer than normal recipients of Nurgle's attention. Slaanesh's patronage reflected the Prince of Pleasure's fascination with Abaddon's pursuit of perfection in all aspects of warfare and leadership, viewing him as an artist whose medium was conquest and whose masterpiece would be the fall of the Imperium itself. The Dark Prince's gifts enhanced Abaddon's natural charisma and leadership abilities to supernatural levels, making him capable of inspiring fanatical devotion even among warriors who had no logical reason to follow him. The price involved an ever-increasing need for stimulation and achievement that drove Abaddon toward increasingly ambitious and dangerous undertakings. The collection of ancient relics from the Horus Heresy era represented both practical necessity and profound emotional significance for Abaddon and his followers. These artifacts served as tangible connections to the glory days when the Traitor Legions had come within a hair's breadth of conquering the galaxy, while simultaneously providing enhanced capabilities that could prove decisive in the ongoing long war against the Imperium. The systematic recovery and preservation of these items required extensive intelligence gathering and carefully planned raids against heavily defended Imperial repositories. Fragments of Horus's original armor were among the most prized possessions within the Black Legion's reliquary, each piece representing both a connection to their fallen Primarch and a source of supernatural protection for those deemed worthy to wear them. The ceramite plates, still bearing the scars of the final battle aboard the Vengeful Spirit, had been infused with psychic energy during Horus's transformation into a Chaos champion. The The protective auras generated by these armor fragments could deflect even the most powerful weapons, while their presence inspired nearby Chaos Space Marines to feats of heroism that bordered on the suicidal. The recovery of Horus's personal effects required raids against multiple Imperial facilities, where these items had been stored as evidence of the arch-traitor's defeat. The systematic infiltration of Inquisition strongholds and Space Marine chapter reliquaries demanded coordination between multiple specialist teams over extended periods, with each operation carefully planned to avoid triggering broader Imperial responses that might compromise future acquisitions. The symbolic value of reclaiming these artifacts proved as important as their practical applications, demonstrating to both allies and enemies that the Black Legion remained committed to their fallen Primarch's legacy. The acquisition of pre-heresy equipment and weapons provided the Black Legion with capabilities that had been lost during the millennia of technological decline that followed the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne. Ancient plasma weapons that operated at efficiency levels far exceeding current Imperial specifications, power armor systems that incorporated now-forgotten defensive technologies, and vehicles whose machine spirits retained memories of the Great Crusade's greatest victories all contributed to the Legion's growing military effectiveness. The establishment of hidden armories throughout the Eye of Terror and beyond required careful selection of storage sites that could protect these precious artifacts from both environmental hazards and potential thieves. Ancient space hulks drifting through the warp provided natural vaults whose twisted geometries made them nearly impossible to navigate without detailed knowledge of their layouts. Demon worlds offered supernatural protection through the direct intervention of chaos entities who viewed the relics as offerings worthy of their guardianship. Former Imperial facilities that had been captured during previous Black Crusades were converted into secure repositories whose defensive systems had been enhanced with both technological and supernatural protections. The process of cataloging and maintaining these collections required the services of specialized tech adepts whose loyalty to the Black Legion had been secured through a combination of ideological conversion and practical necessity. These fallen members of the Adeptus Mechanicus brought with them knowledge of ancient technologies and preservation techniques that proved essential for maintaining artifacts that had survived for thousands of years in hostile environments. Their corruption by chaos influence enhanced their technical abilities while simultaneously binding them more closely to Abaddon's cause through shared damnation. The systematic study of recovered artifacts provided insights into pre-heresy military doctrine and technological capabilities that proved invaluable for planning future operations against Imperial forces. Ancient tactical manuals revealed strategic approaches that current Imperial commanders might not anticipate, while technical specifications for obsolete weapon systems provided templates for creating enhanced versions using modern manufacturing techniques. The accumulated knowledge gained from these studies contributed significantly to the tactical innovations that made the later Black Crusades so devastatingly effective. The integration of recovered artifacts into the Black Legion standard equipment required careful consideration of both practical utility and symbolic significance. Items with direct connections to the Horus Heresy were typically reserved for the most senior commanders, whose status within the Legion hierarchy made them appropriate recipients of such honors. Lesser relics were distributed among company champions and veteran sergeants, creating a visible hierarchy of prestige that reinforced the Legion's command structure, while simultaneously inspiring competition for advancement among the rank and file. The influence of these artifacts extended beyond their immediate wielders to affect the entire character of units that operated in their presence. Ancient banners that had flown during the Siege of Terra generated auras of supernatural courage that made nearby warriors effectively immune to fear and panic. Reliquary boxes containing fragments of Traitor Primarch Jean's seed enhanced the combat effectiveness of entire squads while simultaneously marking them as chosen champions of their respective legion's legacy. The transformation of the Black Legion from the shattered remnants of the Sons of Horus into the galaxy's most formidable chaos force, required more than just Abaddon's personal leadership and tactical brilliance. The creation of a reliable command structure capable of coordinating the diverse elements that comprised his growing army demanded the establishment of an inner circle whose members possessed both exceptional individual capabilities and unwavering loyalty to their Warmaster's vision. The Ezekarian, as this elite group became known, represented the culmination of Abaddon's understanding that effective leadership required delegation of authority to subordinates who could be trusted to execute complex operations independently while remaining committed to the overall strategic objectives. The formation of the Ezekarian reflected Abaddon's systematic approach to identifying and recruiting the most capable warriors from across the spectrum of Traitor Legion veterans and other Chaos-aligned forces. Each member brought unique skills and perspectives that complemented the others, creating a collective leadership capability that far exceeded the sum of its individual parts. The selection process involved not merely combat prowess or tactical acumen, but also psychological compatibility with both Abaddon's leadership style and the diverse personalities of the other Ezekarian members. The resulting group functioned as both military command council and personal brotherhood, bound together by shared experiences in the long war and mutual respect for each other's capabilities. Cadia the Sorcerer stood among the most influential members of Abaddon's inner circle, his mastery of psychic disciplines providing capabilities that proved essential for coordinating the Black Legion's increasingly complex operations. His background as a former Thousand Sons legionary brought with it extensive knowledge of warp phenomena and the subtle arts of manipulation that could turn enemies into allies or sow discord among Imperial forces. The sorceress abilities he wielded went far beyond simple combat applications, encompassing strategic divination that could reveal enemy intentions, communication networks that functioned across vast distances, and protective wards that shielded Black Legion forces from psychic attack. The integration of Cadia into the Black Legion's command structure required careful management of the suspicions and rivalries that typically characterized relationships between psychers and non-psychic space marines. His demonstrated loyalty during the Legion Wars and his crucial role in several major victories gradually earned him acceptance among warriors who might otherwise have viewed his abilities with distrust. The systematic employment of his powers in support of conventional military operations proved their practical value while simultaneously establishing precedents for the controlled use of sorcery that would guide Black Legion doctrine for millennia to come. Cadia's personal armory included artifacts recovered from the ruins of Prospero and other sites associated with the Thousand Sons Legion, each item carefully selected for its ability to enhance his already formidable psychic capabilities. The forestaff he wielded had been crafted by Magnus the Red himself during the early days of the Great Crusade, its crystalline headpiece containing fragments of psychically active minerals that amplified telepathic and telekinetic abilities far beyond normal human limits. The ornate armor he wore incorporated protective runes and psychic dampening fields that provided defense against both physical attack and hostile sorcery, while allowing his own powers to function without interference. The establishment of Cadia's position within the Ezekarian also formalized the Black Legion's approach to recruiting and managing psychers from other Traitor Legions and Chaos-aligned forces. His role as chief sorcerer provided a model for integrating psychic specialists into conventional military hierarchies while maintaining the discipline necessary for effective unit cohesion. The training programs he developed for lesser psychers within the Legion emphasized practical applications of their abilities, rather than the esoteric pursuits that had characterized many pre-Heresy librarious organizations. Telemachon Lyras represented another crucial element of Abaddon's inner circle, his background as a former Emperor's Children champion, bringing with him expertise in personal combat and the psychological manipulation of both allies and enemies. His reputation for deadly precision with blade and bolter was matched by his understanding of the subtle arts of inspiration and intimidation that could determine the outcome of battles before the first shots were fired. The combination of martial prowess and charismatic leadership made him invaluable for operations that required direct personal intervention by senior Black Legion commanders. The recruitment of Telemachon had required overcoming the mutual suspicions that typically existed between former sons of Horus and Emperor's children, as the two legions had developed significantly different approaches to warfare and leadership during the Great Crusade. His willingness to abandon the pursuit of sensation that characterized many of his former brothers in favor of the disciplined professionalism that Abaddon demanded demonstrated the kind of personal transformation that the Black Legion sought to inspire in all its recruits. The systematic integration of his combat techniques and tactical insights into Black Legion doctrine provided enhanced capabilities that proved decisive in numerous engagements. The personal equipment that Telemachon brought with him included weapons and armor that had been crafted by the finest artificers of the Third Legion during their Golden Age, each piece representing both exceptional functionality and artistic achievement. The power sword he wielded incorporated sonic generators that could shatter enemy armor through harmonic resonance, while its monomolecular edge remained sharp enough to cut through ceramite with minimal resistance. The artificer armor he wore had been modified with additional protective systems and enhanced mobility features that allowed him to engage multiple opponents simultaneously, while maintaining the grace and precision that had made him legendary among his former legion. The role that Telemachon assumed within the Azakaryan extended beyond simple military command to encompass diplomatic functions that proved crucial for maintaining relationships with other Chaos-aligned forces. His understanding of the various cultural traditions and honor codes that govern different Traitor Legion factions made him an effective negotiator when establishing temporary alliances or resolving disputes that might otherwise escalate into open warfare. The network of personal relationships he maintained with commanders from other legions provided the Black Legion with intelligence assets and potential allies that proved invaluable during major campaigns. Liorvain Ukris brought to the Azakaryan the brutal efficiency and systematic approach to warfare that had characterized the World Eater's Legion before their complete descent into berserker madness. His ability to channel the rage granted by Khorne's influence while maintaining tactical awareness and strategic thinking made him uniquely valuable among Abaddon's lieutenants. The combination of enhanced physical capabilities and retained intellectual function allowed him to serve as both frontline combat leader and strategic planner for operations that required the systematic application of overwhelming violence. The integration of Liorvain into the Black Legion's command structure required careful management of his enhanced aggression and the influence of Khorne's blessing upon his behavior. The establishment of specific protocols for channeling his combat fury toward productive military objectives while preventing it from disrupting unit cohesion became a model for managing other Khorne-blessed warriors within the Legion's ranks. His demonstrated ability to control his berserker impulses when strategic considerations demanded restraint earned him respect from commanders who might otherwise have viewed World Eater's veterans as unreliable assets. The weapons and equipment that Liorvain employed reflected both his World Eater's heritage and his adaptation to Black Legion operational requirements. The chain axe he wielded had been blessed by Khorne's own priests during the early stages of the Heresy, its teeth constantly weeping blood that never dried and its machine spirit driven by an insatiable hunger for violence. The modifications he had made to his power armor included additional close combat weapons and enhanced protection systems that allowed him to survive in the heart of enemy formations while dealing devastating damage to anyone within reach. Falcus Kibber, known throughout the Legion as the Widowmaker, represented the steady professionalism and tactical competence that had made the Sons of Horus so effective during the Great Crusade. His role within the Azakaryan focused on conventional military operations and the coordination of large-scale campaigns that required precise timing and flawless execution. The experience he had gained during decades of warfare against every conceivable type of enemy provided the Black Legion with institutional knowledge that proved invaluable when developing tactical doctrines for new types of operations. The position that Falkus occupied within the Black Legion hierarchy reflected both his personal capabilities and his symbolic importance as one of the few surviving veterans of the original Justaerin Terminators. His presence provided a direct connection to the Legion's origins, while simultaneously demonstrating the evolution that had transformed them from loyal servants of the Emperor into the galaxy's most dangerous chaos force. The respect he commanded among both former Sons of Horus and newer recruits helped maintain unit cohesion during the difficult process of integrating warriors from diverse backgrounds. The Terminator armor that Falkus wore had been continuously upgraded and modified throughout the millennia since the Heresy, incorporating technological improvements and chaos enhancements that made it far more capable than standard Imperial patterns. The Storm Bolter integrated into his left gauntlet-fired ammunition that had been blessed by Dark Mechanicum Tech priests, each round capable of penetrating even the heaviest armor while carrying payloads of corrupted machine spirits that could disable enemy equipment. The Power Fist mounted on his right arm incorporated disruptor field generators that could tear apart molecular bonds in addition to delivering devastating kinetic impacts. Igethmer the Deceiver brought to the Ezekarian the subtle skills and strategic thinking that had made the Alpha Legion so effective during their covert operations throughout the Great Crusade and Heresy. His expertise in intelligence gathering, sabotage, and psychological warfare provided the Black Legion with capabilities that complemented their more conventional military strengths, while opening new possibilities for achieving strategic objectives through indirect means. The networks of agents and informants that he maintained throughout both Imperial and Chaos-controlled territories provided early warning of enemy movements, while simultaneously creating opportunities for preemptive strikes against critical targets. The integration of Alpha Legion methodologies into Black Legion operations required careful adaptation to account for the different operational requirements and command structures that characterized Abaddon's forces. The systematic development of covert capabilities within conventional military units created hybrid formations that could transition seamlessly between open warfare and clandestine operations as circumstances required. The training programs that Igethmer established for developing these capabilities emphasized adaptability and independent thinking while maintaining the discipline necessary for effective coordination with conventional forces. The specialized equipment that Igethmer employed reflected the Alpha Legion's emphasis on versatility and concealment, with each item carefully selected for its ability to function effectively in multiple operational environments. The bolter he carried could be rapidly reconfigured for different tactical situations, with interchangeable barrel assemblies and ammunition types that allowed it to serve as sniper weapon, assault rifle, or close combat tool as circumstances demanded. The advanced Auspex systems integrated into his armor provided detailed environmental data and enemy intelligence that proved crucial for planning and executing complex operations. The establishment of relationships with other major Chaos factions required diplomatic skills and strategic thinking that went beyond simple military considerations. The Word-Bearers Legion, with their emphasis on religious devotion and ideological purity, represented both potential allies and dangerous rivals, whose cooperation could prove crucial for major campaigns. The systematic cultivation of relationships with Word-Bearer commanders required careful attention to their theological concerns and the demonstration of appropriate reverence for the Chaos gods while maintaining the independence that characterized Black Legion doctrine. Erebus and other senior Word-Bearer leaders viewed the Black Legion with a mixture of respect and suspicion, recognizing Abaddon's tactical competence while questioning his commitment to the true faith that they believed should guide all servants of Chaos. The negotiations required to secure Word-Bearer participation in Black Legion operations often involved complex theological discussions and the demonstration of appropriate ritual observances that satisfied their religious requirements. The resulting alliances, while often temporary and conditional, provided access to specialized capabilities and resources that proved invaluable during major campaigns. The Iron Warriors Legion represented another crucial potential ally whose expertise in siege warfare and technological innovation could significantly enhance Black Legion capabilities. The systematic approach to warfare that characterized Perdurabo's sons resonated with Abaddon's own emphasis on professional competence and tactical excellence, creating natural opportunities for cooperation despite the rivalries that existed between different Traitor Legion factions. The establishment of working relationships with Iron Warrior commanders required demonstration of mutual respect and the recognition of their particular areas of expertise. The technological resources that Iron Warrior allies brought to Black Legion operations included advanced siege equipment, defensive fortifications, and specialized vehicles that had been continuously improved throughout the millennia since the Heresy. The systematic integration of these assets into Black Legion tactical doctrines required careful coordination and the development of new operational procedures that could accommodate the different approaches to warfare favored by each faction. The resulting combined formations possessed capabilities that exceeded those of either force operating independently. The network of mortal cultists that supported Black Legion operations represented a crucial force multiplier that provided intelligence, logistical support, and local knowledge throughout Imperial space. These human followers, drawn from every level of Imperial society, had been recruited through a combination of ideological conversion, personal grievances against Imperial authority, and promises of power and advancement under Chaos rule. The systematic cultivation of these assets required careful attention to security protocols and the establishment of communication networks that could function despite Imperial counterintelligence efforts. The organization of cultist networks followed cell-based structures that limited the damage that could result from the discovery and elimination of individual groups, while maintaining the coordination necessary for effective support of military operations. The training programs developed for these assets emphasized operational security, basic military skills, and the ideological indoctrination necessary to maintain loyalty despite the risks involved in serving Chaos forces. The resulting organizations provided capabilities that conventional military forces could not match, including deep penetration of Imperial institutions and access to resources that would otherwise be unavailable. The recruitment of renegade Imperial Guard regiments provided the Black Legion with conventional military capabilities that complemented their elite Space Marine formations, while offering opportunities for large-scale operations that would be impossible using only Astartes forces. These formations, typically recruited from units that had been abandoned by Imperial command or exposed to Chaos corruption during extended campaigns, brought with them knowledge of current Imperial tactical doctrines and equipment specifications. The systematic integration of these forces required new command structures and training programs that could accommodate the different capabilities and limitations of unenhanced human soldiers. The corruption of Mechanicum Forge worlds represented one of the most significant strategic achievements in establishing the Black Legion's long-term operational capabilities. These facilities provided access to manufacturing capabilities and technological resources that were essential for maintaining and expanding Chaos military forces over extended periods. The systematic subversion of tech priest hierarchies required careful application of both ideological arguments and practical demonstrations of Chaos-enhanced technology's superiority over orthodox Imperial patterns. The Dark Mechanicum assets that resulted from these corruption efforts provided capabilities that went far beyond simple manufacturing, encompassing research and development programs that created new weapons and equipment specifically designed for Chaos forces. The demon engines and corrupted vehicles produced by these facilities incorporated both advanced Imperial technology and supernatural enhancements that made them devastatingly effective against conventional Imperial forces. The systematic deployment of these assets during Black Legion operations provided significant tactical advantages while simultaneously demonstrating the practical benefits of embracing Chaos influence. The coordination of these diverse allies and assets required command and control capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible using conventional military organization. The establishment of unified command structures that could accommodate the different operational requirements and cultural traditions of various allied factions demanded diplomatic skills and strategic thinking that complemented Abaddon's tactical abilities. The resulting coalition represented the most formidable chaos force assembled since the Horus Heresy, capable of conducting operations on a scale that threatened the very foundations of imperial power throughout the galaxy. The creation of the Great Rift fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the galaxy in ways that even Abaddon could not have fully anticipated. The massive warp storm that now bisected imperial space from the Eye of Terror to the Hadron Expanse represented more than just a tactical victory. It was the culmination of 10 millennia of preparation and the opening move in what would become known as the Era Indomitus. The Cicatrix Maledictum, as imperial scholars would name this cosmic wound, transformed regions that had been secure imperial territory for thousands of years into contested battlegrounds, where the laws of physics held tenuous sway and demon incursions became commonplace occurrences. The immediate aftermath of Cadia's destruction saw Abaddon's forces exploiting the chaos and confusion that gripped imperial command structures throughout the region. The systematic collapse of astropathic communication networks, disrupted by the Great Rift's psychic interference, left imperial commanders blind to the scope of the catastrophe that had befallen their most critical defensive position. Fortress worlds that had anchored imperial defense strategies for millennia found themselves isolated and vulnerable, their garrisons unable to coordinate responses or request reinforcements from neighboring systems. The Dark Imperium, as the galaxy's northern half became known following the Rift's creation, provided Abaddon with opportunities that exceeded even his most optimistic projections. The weakening of the Astronomican's light in these regions made warp travel increasingly hazardous for Imperial forces, while simultaneously creating stable corridors that Chaos fleets could exploit with relative impunity. The systematic establishment of forward operating bases on worlds that had been cut off from Imperial reinforcement allowed the Black Legion to project power deep into territory that had previously been beyond their reach. The theological implications of the Great Rift's creation reverberated throughout Imperial society, with effects that proved as devastating as any military defeat. The visible manifestation of chaos power on such a cosmic scale challenged fundamental assumptions about the Emperor's protection and the Imperium's ultimate destiny that had sustained human civilization for 10,000 years. Entire worlds witnessed their populations descending into madness, heresy, or despair as the reality of their situation became apparent. The ecclesiarchy's attempts to maintain religious orthodoxy in the face of such overwhelming evidence of chaos ascendancy proved increasingly futile as local populations turned to forbidden practices in desperate attempts to survive. The strategic doctrine that Abaddon implemented in the wake of the 13th Black Crusade reflected lessons learned from millennia of warfare against imperial forces. Rather than attempting to hold territory through conventional occupation, his forces adopted a fluid approach that emphasized mobility, surprise, and the systematic destruction of imperial infrastructure. The goal was not immediate conquest, but rather the gradual erosion of imperial capability and morale through sustained pressure that prevented effective consolidation of defensive positions. The employment of demon engines and corrupted war machines proved particularly effective in this new strategic environment, as their supernatural nature allowed them to function reliably in regions where conventional technology might fail due to warp interference. The systematic deployment of these assets against imperial strongholds created tactical situations that loyalist commanders found increasingly difficult to counter using orthodox military doctrine. The psychological impact of facing enemies that defied rational understanding proved as devastating as their physical capabilities, breaking the morale of Imperial Guard formations that had been trained to fight conventional opponents. The coordination of multiple simultaneous campaigns across the Dark Imperium required organizational capabilities that pushed the Black Legion's command structure to its absolute limits. The systematic employment of specialized task forces against carefully selected targets demonstrated tactical sophistication that had evolved considerably since the early Black Crusades. Each operation was planned to complement others in ways that maximized overall strategic impact while minimizing the resources required for individual missions. The integration of various Chaos factions into these expanded operations created coalition forces that possessed capabilities far exceeding those of any single warband or legion. The systematic coordination of different tactical specialties and operational approaches required diplomatic skills and strategic thinking that complemented Abaddon's military abilities. The resulting campaigns demonstrated levels of cooperation between Chaos forces that had not been seen since the Horus Heresy itself. The response of the broader Imperium to the creation of the Great Rift and the subsequent Chaos offensives revealed both strengths and weaknesses in Imperial defensive doctrine that had developed over the millennia since the Heresy. The systematic mobilization of Space Marine chapters, Imperial Guard regiments, and naval assets demonstrated the Imperium's continued capacity for large-scale military operations, despite the communication and logistical challenges created by the Rift's interference. However, the coordination difficulties and resource allocation disputes that characterized much of the Imperial response also highlighted the institutional problems that had accumulated within Imperial command structures over 10,000 years of bureaucratic evolution. The emergence of Roboute Guilliman from his deathless slumber and his assumption of the role of Lord Commander represented the most significant challenge to Abaddon's strategic position since the death of Horus himself. The returned Primarch's understanding of Space Marine tactical doctrine and his experience with large-scale military operations provided Imperial forces with leadership capabilities that had been absent since the Great Crusade. The systematic reorganization of Imperial defensive strategies under Guilliman's direction created new challenges that required adaptation of Chaos tactical approaches developed over millennia of warfare against less competent opponents. The Indomitus Crusade that Guilliman launched in response to the Chaos offensives demonstrated the Imperium's continued capacity for strategic innovation and large-scale military operations, despite the challenges created by the Great Rift. The systematic employment of newly created Primaris Space Marines alongside conventional Imperial forces provided capabilities that Chaos commanders had not previously encountered. The enhanced physical characteristics and improved equipment of these new Astartes required tactical adaptations that drew upon every aspect of the Black Legion's accumulated experience. The theological significance of Abaddon's role as the Imperium's greatest existential threat extended beyond simple military considerations to encompass the fundamental nature of humanity's struggle against the forces of chaos. His position as Warmaster of Chaos Undivided represented the antithesis of everything the Emperor had sought to achieve through the Great Crusade and the establishment of the imperial system. The systematic corruption of human worlds and the gradual expansion of chaos influence throughout the galaxy demonstrated the ultimate consequences of the choices made during the Horus Heresy. The character evolution that had transformed Abaddon from a loyal space marine into the ultimate embodiment of Chaos's war against the Imperium reflected broader themes about the nature of corruption, ambition, and the price of power that resonated throughout Imperial history. His journey from the gang wars of Thonia to his position as Warmaster represented both personal tragedy and cosmic inevitability, demonstrating how individual choices could have consequences that affected the entire galaxy. The systematic analysis of Abaddon's tactical innovations and strategic approaches revealed patterns that had influenced chaos warfare doctrine throughout the millennia since the Heresy. His emphasis on coalition building, technological adaptation, and psychological warfare had created methodologies that other chaos leaders attempted to emulate with varying degrees of success. The Black Legion's organizational structure and operational procedures became templates that influenced the development of other major chaos factions throughout the galaxy. The long-term implications of the Great Rift's creation and the subsequent expansion of chaos influence represented challenges that would define Imperial strategy for centuries to come. The systematic establishment of permanent chaos presence in regions that had been secure Imperial territory for millennia created new strategic realities that required fundamental reassessment of defensive doctrine and resource allocation priorities. The coordination required to maintain effective resistance against sustained chaos pressure tested every aspect of Imperial institutional capability. The legacy that Abaddon established through his transformation of the Black Legion and his role in creating the current strategic situation extended far beyond immediate military considerations. His demonstration that the forces of chaos could achieve strategic objectives through sustained effort and systematic planning provided inspiration for other enemies of the Imperium, while simultaneously creating precedents for future conflicts. The methodologies he developed for managing diverse coalition forces and coordinating complex multi-phase operations became standard practices that influenced chaos warfare throughout the galaxy. The psychological impact of Abaddon's continued existence and the ongoing threat he represented affected Imperial society at every level, from the highest echelons of government to individual citizens on worlds that had never directly experienced chaos attack. The knowledge that such a formidable enemy remained active and capable of launching devastating offensives created an atmosphere of constant vigilance and preparation that shaped Imperial culture in fundamental ways. The resources devoted to containing and countering the chaos threat represented a significant drain on Imperial capabilities that affected every other aspect of governmental and military operations. The technological innovations that emerged from the Black Legion's continuous warfare against Imperial forces demonstrated the cumulative effect of millennia of tactical evolution and strategic adaptation. The systematic integration of captured Imperial equipment with chaos-corrupted technology created hybrid systems that possessed capabilities exceeding those of their individual components. The employment of these enhanced technologies in combat operations provided significant advantages that forced Imperial forces to continuously adapt their own equipment and tactical doctrines. The ultimate significance of Abaddon's transformation from loyal Astartes to Warmaster of Chaos lay not merely in his individual achievements, but in what his existence represented about the fundamental nature of the galaxy's ongoing conflicts. His journey from the depths of Thonia to his position as the Imperium's greatest enemy demonstrated both the potential for individual achievement and the terrible costs of ambition unchecked by moral constraints. The legacy he created through 10,000 years of warfare would continue to influence the galaxy's fate long after his eventual destruction or ascension to demon princehood. As the 42nd millennium dawned with the galaxy split by the Great Rift and Imperial forces struggling to maintain cohesion in the face of unprecedented chaos aggression, Abaddon's position as the ultimate enemy of mankind remained unassailable. The Despoiler had achieved what the arch-traitor Horus could not: the systematic weakening of Imperial power and the establishment of permanent chaos presence throughout human space. His legacy would endure as long as the Imperium itself existed, a constant reminder of the price of betrayal and the eternal struggle between order and chaos that defined humanity's existence in the grim darkness of the far future.